Out of here.
All right, you're on.
All right, I'd like to call to order the special meeting for the Board of Finance for Monday, March 3rd. We'll open with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As a housekeeping thing, Brian and Brianna have joined us by Zoom, so they will be all attending through the Zoom process. Is there any public comment? We have a room full of people, so let's get started. Floor is yours, Rosa.
All right. Well, actually, I
Welcome.
think Wendy's, thank you. Wendy's gonna
Oh, I thought you
start
were
us
sitting at
off.
the computer. I apologize, Wendy.
Yeah, we're
That's okay.
both kind of manning it here.
Is this mic on? I just want to make sure. Brian, can you hear okay?
Yeah, I can
Yep.
hear. I don't know
Okay.
if I'll ever be able to keep charge, but just keep going.
Okay, great, thanks. So first, thanks for having us here this evening. We appreciate the chance to lay out this year's budget for you and to engage in productive discussion to help you better understand it as an expression of the district vision for education. The public can have confidence in this budget. It's lean, it's straightforward, and it's the result of the healthy partnership and responsible coordination between the boards of selectmen, finance, and education. So I'm going to start with a recap of the budget process and the timeline. Next, I'll go into the strategic focus areas of the budget, showing how each aligns with this year's articulated goals for the district. Then I'll hand things off to Rosa, Chair of the Finance Committee, which in essence acts as our board's budget committee, to take you through the numbers. We have our executive team members here tonight, as well as our building principals. Thank you very much for being here. They can help answer some of the more technical questions should the need arise. Okay, so actually, can we go to the development process first, please? Sure. Yeah, okay.
And Brian, Eric is trying to get the computer, the stuff on the screen for
So
you.
Okay, just keep going.
Yeah, let me-
Shows will be happy.
Sure, let me touch quickly on the budget development and review process. I know many of you are familiar with it. For folks watching at home, the overarching point is that the budget has been developed from the ground up, from classroom professionals to department leaders to building principals to the superintendent. At each level, there has been careful scrutiny about student learning needs. Our process starts in October. We forecast expenditures, as you know, almost a year in advance per this town's established practices. That means that in the first trimester of any given school year, the next year's budget is already being prepared. In the past several years, the superintendent has presented his budget at the first of our 2 December meetings. That is when board members start to give feedback. This happens chiefly through the Finance Committee, which conducts a rigorous line-by-line examination of the budget. Other board members ask questions about content. This could include budgeting strategy, accounting and naming practices, ties to goals, etc. And this year's Q&A document is 32 pages, single-spaced. I know you're all familiar with it. It's available on our website, but Dr. Burrell says he's got copies of it here if anybody would like to have a look when we get down into the nitty-gritty.
I got my own copy, John.
I want to give a shout out to the board, to the whole board, for doing such a thorough job vetting this budget. The board voted to approve the budget on January 15th. Can you click in the next section? Thank you. We delivered it to the first selectman on January 31st. He made recommendations, then moved the budget to this body. And on the slide that Rosa has, you can see how advanced we are in this process. We are presenting to you this evening. Okay, next.
Okay.
No, actually, could you go back to the, yeah.
Our best one?
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, so here's a reminder for folks who are newer to this of the long release strategy employed to get maximum strategic benefit from the infusion of federal funding that we received under the ARP-ESSER. That's the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Plan. That was part of the COVID package. Over the past several years, with the cooperation of the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Ed, the town strategically invested ARP-ESSER funds in long-term educational initiatives. Some were state mandated, such as the elementary reading program, and some were intended to improve teachers' delivery of new curriculum to students with a wide range of learning styles. These investments were designed with a measured release plan to ensure sustained impact. As a result, this year's budget reflects a lower funding need while our schools and community begin to realize the full benefits of these thoughtful, forward-looking investments in educational programming. So now we can go to the next one, thank you. Okay, the proposed budget aligns with the district's educational goals by supporting the implementation of the strategic plan and further integrating the portrait of the learner. This is the plan that the board supports for addressing academic achievement in target areas, as you can see here. Okay, I want to pause here. The next several slides have our five articulated goals, and I'm not going to read them to you. What I want to point out, though, is that these frame the priorities that drove the formulation of this budget. The focus areas are specific and sharply germane to our larger goals of delivering a top-tier education for every student. So as you can see, for Goal 1, the board identified priority areas of action for the superintendent, and Dr. Burrell turned those into 5 macro goals, the first of which is maintaining class size within guidelines while adjusting staffing patterns to reflect enrollment changes and achieve efficiencies. I think we can go, to number 2 is about providing a rigorous, relevant curriculum using best practices in instruction, assessment, and learning. And can you just pause there so folks could have a look? Great, thank you. So these are the standout budgetary items connected with each goal. You will see that some items appear in more than one goal area, and this speaks to the deliberate and strategic management of resources to get the biggest bang for our buck. Next. Okay. Goal 3 is to maintain and continue to enhance programs while remaining responsive to changing organizational needs. Sure.
So, go back to that slide.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk to that point, because this is where you sort of lose me a little bit in the process here.
Understand?
Of how many hours did you have spent this year in this current budget on curriculum? Man hours, woman hours, FTE hours?
Specifically I don't have the specific hours in terms of extra duty, extended duty.
So then how would you calculate you need 4 full-time employees for that position? Because now, if you only paid it via a stipend, you couldn't have had more than 1,000 hours thrown at this problem. We now are throwing 4 full FTEs, which are 1,200, like 5,000 hours at a problem. So how did we go from a small amount of stipend to a very large amount of FTE change?
So I'm happy to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope that you won't characterize curriculum work as addressing a problem per se. I think you can provide a fuller answer there.
Sure.
But I think we should recast that.
Absolutely.
That it's a living, breathing part of doing work in schools.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that you asked this question because I'm always happy to talk about curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So just to, as Dr. Youngblood just said, curriculum hours do not, trying to equate a need for a specific number of hours only as a curriculum project is not the most holistic way to think about this. So first, let's back up to the instructional coaches. So the background to the instructional coaches, those FTEs grew out of a long time established practice of this district to have curriculum specialists at the various school levels. So prior to the instructional coaching, there were full-time curriculum developers who don't just write the curriculum, they help transition the written curriculum into the actual taught curriculum. So they provide ongoing and regular professional learning in a regular way to teachers as they are working through and working in the curriculum into the instruction. And then conceiving on how that instruction relates to effective assessment practices, that you then analyze the assessments and then get feedback in order to incorporate the curriculum.
So I'll go back to the question though again, like I've spent X amount of hours, which is a very small
that's-
amount of hours.
No,
How
that's
did
not
I
how
determine I need 4 full, because Steve, you'd be asked this in your job. I need an accountant, Steve. Well, I need 4 accountants. Why do
Can
you need
I-
4 accountants? Well,
can
I
I
need
help
them. I
with
think
the-
I need them. How do you justify going from X hours? It was a stipends positions for many years. Since I've been doing these budgets, it's been pretty much stipend except for one curriculum leader.
I believe there were two
Okay,
at the
two,
elementary.
I'll give you two.
I
Now
actually
we're
think there might have
going,
been three at
we're
one
more
point.
than doubling the staff for this curriculum part of this. How did we, from a business point of view, the justification of adding full FTEs, because you did add, I mean, I know you eliminated, but this is an add, even though it's a net
It's-
zero ad, net zero ad, but it's an ad. You went from, it's just like me like taking Marcia and saying I'm gonna move her to the land director department. It's a net zero, but it's not. We've added 4 full-time FTE positions, and generally, in my world, if you add an FTE position, you gotta have a business plan behind it. What's the workload? Why did we go from 1,000 hours to 6,000 hours?
So I'm not sure where you're talking about 1,000 to 6,000, and certainly
Well,
Rosa,
you
you
see-
can.
Let me just help bridge the gap, because I think like what you're maybe trying to understand is in terms of hours and FTEs, and maybe you can maybe explain more about the fact that it's humanities STEM related and the
Happy
fact
to
that we
do that.
have content area differences that need to have this sort of specialized.
And also the instructional coaches is a point, and Anna can make this point further. The 6 instructional coaches didn't just coach, they also worked on curriculum. They're still curriculum leaders, so that was a part of this. So that never really went away. We added the instructional coaching responsibility to the existing curriculum support folks, so.
Right, so there are a variety of ways that we do curriculum development, and curriculum development is not just writing a document and being done with it. Curriculum development is an ongoing, as Dr. Youngblood said, an ongoing, constant reflection process. But for those hours I think you're referring to, we build in addition to these FTEs, we build in extended duty time for distributed leadership, so that so other teachers, classroom teachers, and at the various buildings across the district have the opportunity to engage in the curriculum writing process. These FTE with curriculum support teachers, the purpose of this is to help support that work in both, and the way that we have structured it is for parity across the district, for humanities and STEM at the elementary school, humanities and STEM at the middle school, just like we have humanities and STEM administrators who are partially in charge of overseeing the curriculum at the high school. One of the focuses of the strategic plan that we adopted, that the Board of Ed adopted 2 years ago, is to enhance the assured experiences of students through K through 12, pre-K through 12. The Portrait of the Learner is a big portion of that, and that's half of the strategic plan. These curriculum support teachers are necessary to make sure that that work that's already begun is continuing and enhancing as we flesh out that Portrait of the Learner, but also incorporate new curriculum at the elementary school and continue to align more standards as they continue to grow and change.
Okay.
So the 4 FTEs, 2 at the elementary school and 2 at the middle school, will help align that work, and they will not be the only hours needed in order to flesh out a robust curriculum that will be a constant cycle of reflection, revision, and planning. That work will be enhanced and supported by classroom teachers who will also get extended duty time to do that work, which has been consistent for historically through the district and also is best practice across public school.
Then I did read through your 30-page document. Some of these positions are still getting stipends. So again, we added all of these hours. It's mind-blowing to me to sit here and say, how could you add this many hours and add stipends to the position as well?
We did add
Because
stipends.
you did, it's on page 8.
Teacher
I
leader
got it right
positions,
here.
teacher leader positions in the collective bargaining agreement with the teachers, the BEA, those teacher leader positions have a stipend attached to them.
But the position, in the document, I believe it says to plan for PD days, to plan for this. That can't be incorporated into the 1,200 hours in a work schedule?
That's part of the collective
It's
bargaining
part,
agreement.
it's outside of the.
Outside of the school day work.
We would have to negotiate that impact if that was something that the Board of Ed decided that they wanted to take away from the collective bargaining, the agreed upon CBA with the BEA.
I guess, again, from my point of view, this is mind-boggling to me. This really is mind-blowing that you take 4 full-time FTEs and you add them into a plan. That's gotta be 1,200 hours apiece, if not 13. That's 6.55, or 6 hours, 55 minutes, 180 days. It comes out to 5,000 hours.
Well, you had some of that last year, if you had 6 instructional coaches that were also doing some
Then they're-
curriculum work.
Yeah,
But they're
actually-
sort of doing the same thing then. What changed? I mean,
So
what,
the next
what did we
couple
move
slides
from?
do
Yeah.
address that. So maybe this
Okay.
can clear some things up. So you did, you spoke to a perception of some positions not being understood as valuable. And I think that the district administration has been in constant talks with the building leadership about the best way to distribute FTEs. Is that a fair way of
It
characterizing
never
it?
stops, it's every day we're
Right.
talking about this.
So, this is a reminder of some of the positions that were eliminated in the past 2 years' budgets to create cost savings. But I think that this is probably the slide that will be the most helpful, because this shows, well, let me go on script, it'll all make sense. Yes, for context, over the past 2 years, when faced with budgetary constraints, the administration has worked hard not to lay off personnel. Instead, the administration has reallocated resources in restructured positions so that we can meet our goals with existing staff. And so you see that strategy employed here. Looking at this slide, it's important for people to understand that staffing adjustments here refer to positions being moved, not people. So it's not necessarily person shifting over in these boxes. We thought that this graphic, which is tied to goal number 3, might clarify the reallocation process. That's why one can refer to these staffing changes as budget neutral. Significantly, these staffing decisions reflect what teachers reported was working and not working for them. That's why you see the 6 FTE of instructional coaches being repurposed more, I think, deliberately, more with a more targeted purpose to be curriculum teacher leaders at the elementary and middle school. Does that at all address what you're talking about, or not really?
It's words. It doesn't sell me on.
I think,
I'm sort of-
maybe I don't know if I can, but I think at the end of the day, 77% of the budget for your Board of Ed is, people, right?
Mhm.
And that's why if there's a way to, and like we were talking about the other day, you did a great job in optimizing and cutting spending. So I think the idea is, and I'm sure you guys are doing a great job already, you're doing this, it's just the thought, I think, is to, are those 1,000 hours being used? And if not, then can we,
They are absolutely being used.
Yeah.
so then that's, yeah.
The board
that's-
has supported this plan
Right.
as our plan.
So I'm almost done with my portion. I'll just take you through the last goals. So goal number 4 deals with technology and keeping our digital tools and communication infrastructure strong enough to meet the needs of students, teachers, and families. I wanted to give people a chance to read through it. Okay, and then goal 5. This lays out spending priorities tied to state mandates connected to school climate, bilingual education, and special education. As you know, Dr. Burrell presented the climate legislation to the board and the public at the November 20th meeting. The most important things for you all to know are that there is the potential for a sea change in how climate issues for students are handled at the building level. So the state has retermed its climate language to be more expansive. The state, instead of the definition of bullying behaviors which schools have gotten used to, the state is requiring schools to investigate reports of challenging behavior. That's the language that's part of the statute. This will almost certainly escalate the number of allegations, while at the same time restricting the timeline for the administration to investigate. For example, teachers will no longer be able to resolve behavior issues with informal calls home, an email, or parent square notice. Even when an observed issue is resolved between children, the new law requires formal written investigations and reporting within a 3-day timeline. The district administration sees the potential for a sharp uptick in required hours of legwork here, so this budget proactively prepares us to comply with the law. In this first year, we are devoting 1 FTE to this role, and hopefully student behaviors will show that this is enough of an investment in this area. Regarding the multi-language learner legislation, we have 20 or more, perhaps now, students whose first language is Portuguese at the elementary school. And so the statute says that we we need to provide education there. As Dr. Brill has explained in previous meetings, having a full-time job opening will make this a more attractive position for applicants to be a bilingual educator at CLES. The final part of this goal is to continue to support actions in alignment with both the Special Services Program Review recommendations and the Special Education Department Strategic Plan initiatives. So these 5 goals all dovetail into the strategic goals of the district for next year. A lack of new products or hires does not mean we are doing nothing new. It shows we are keeping our commitment to the investments that support the district vision. The ultimate vision is having each student move meaningfully towards his or her portrait of the learner. And I just want to say, I hope that I got that right about the climate legislation. Okay.
Which we do have copies of if you care to look at more detail.
And I think, Rosa, just before you go on, be very clear and super transparent. The climate legislation does not call for a full-time FTE administrator, it does not call for a teacher, it doesn't call for anything new as a mandate. We are looking at the scope and depth of that particular new law and what it's going to mean on day-to-day operations. And so, using the reallocation strategy from the coaching positions, the old model, essentially, we thought that the compliance teacher made a great deal of sense, and not wanting to go into an administrator type role, which is much more expensive. And then bilingual educator, as Wendy alluded to, again, you have to have bilingual programming when you have a student language 20 or more in school a year in advance. A year after, you have to have that ready to go. We advertised and budgeted for half a teacher because of 20 students. We have a full-time bilingual for over 40 bilingual Spanish-speaking students, so it made sense hours-wise that we'd have a half for Portuguese. We had someone ready to go. They really needed full-time employment and took a job in another district that was offering full-time. We had no other applicants, and so it's an extreme shortage area, bilingual Portuguese. But it doesn't require another half FTE. We're looking proactively at how we can build a program for our students in need. That's what that is.
Is reallocating the best use of resources? Like again, if I put Marcia as the land use director, Marcia's not gonna do well in the land use. We're taking old positions, and she would do well at anything, but I mean, she wouldn't know the regulations. Again, we're taking, what you're telling me is a critical position of climate and corresponding and dealing with things, and we're taking person Z, who's a teacher, and we're reallocating.
No, not at all. That would be an open position, and
But you're moving in, you're not hiring somebody, you're moving somebody in.
We may be.
Oh,
It all
okay.
depends
And
on
then we
attrition.
post all
Positions,
these
not people.
positions.
And
Yeah.
those, and that shifting.
Yeah. We don't have anybody in mind on staff to go into that position.
All right.
So that concludes my portion, and now Rosa's going to walk you through this part.
All right, so this should be familiar to you guys. This was what I presented a few weeks ago. But to understand next year's budget, we must first look at the current year's budget because once again, our drivers are the same. What's here is directly from our January financial report, and I promise to cover each of these sections, but I want to focus on just one or two at a time. The first two areas shown here are shortages where we either have no discretion or have little to no budgeting foresight, and they represent over $850,000 in budgetary exposure. The top section outlines our costs for special education outplacements that have long since been a part of the cooperative budgeting strategy between our boards. This agreement functions best when we can assume other areas are predictable or have little variance. But what I'll show you tonight is that is becoming less and less true. As part of our current budgeting strategy, the Board of Education has been asked not to contemplate any new outplacements when developing the budget for the upcoming year, irrespective of what is known about possible cases at the time. This has led the budget being underfunded by $500,000 annually, an amount that
Hold on,
has
Rosa.
been
Let's talk
supported
to
by
that-
the town.
Let's talk to that point though, before we
Okay.
get away from that point. That has been where we've stood, but we've sat here and talked even at our last meeting. If we know of somebody, and this is a needle mover, we can't have $500,000 sitting out there that's gonna land in our lap next year. Now, we sat here at this meeting and said there was gonna be more than likely 4, one of which has been arranged in a satisfactory manner. But we got 3 more sitting out there to the tune of $500,000. That's not included in Steve's budget, not included in your budget.
I will get
Where-
to that.
But where are we coming up with this money? Where in these budgets are we coming up with $500,000? Is this a 70% chance, an 80% chance?
I will absolutely get
90?
to that.
Okay,
Yep.
'cause
This bottom section outlines some additional under-budgeted or not budgeted expenses that are out of management's control. These are expenses that we anticipate being unique to this year and have also not included in the 25-26 budget estimate. Nevertheless, they are quite impactful this year, and they highlight the challenges in creating our budget. This section, as well as the ones I'll show next, also demonstrate that what is within our control is budgeted and managed well. It's not a tightening that is needed, but the ability to have flexible response to these unknowns. Like any budget of this size, there are areas that we will find under budgeted in a particular year or are trending in a more predictable way. Those you will see in this top section here, though again, most are attributed to special education. These are expenses that we have not historically asked the town to cover and instead have managed those through typical budget underruns that are shown in the bottom section. There you will also notice $200,000 in salary savings due to leaves and vacancies. That is net of expenditures for the long-term sub-costs they have created. Keep in mind, we don't budget for long-term subs at all, and any savings or overages caused by leaves and vacancies are entirely determined by the particular individual taking the leave, the length and the reason for their leave, and how much sick time they have saved and are using. In addition to the typical account variances that have been managed well by Mrs. Di and building leaders, a budget freeze was instituted on most discretionary accounts, given the additional unexpected overages I showed on the previous slide. Later, I will discuss difficulties budgeting for employee benefits, but what has historically been needed to discuss but you don't see here is short-term subs. This was a source of debate, and if you remember from last year's presentation, we budgeted a sizable increase in short-term subs in order to better recognize actuals and account for predicted expenditures. And that is exactly what we did, and which is why you don't see, for the first time in a long time, long-term subs on this table. So, we understand that the budget shortfall being discussed here is more than the town had set aside in contingency funding, but I'd like to summarize the primary contributions to this predicament. The first is unfunded mandates and unanticipated expenses. Those have presented well over $300,000 in unbudgeted obligations for the Board of Ed this year, yet better budgeting and or controls is not possible. We welcome any ideas you have, but the fact remains that students might experience home displacement situations and we cannot predict them. Occasionally, individuals may present with unique needs that we must address, and the timing of our budget process will likely always be out of sync with the delivery of accurate utility and benefit rates, and those estimates may help or they may hinder the bottom line. But the biggest contributing factor to this and future budget overruns is the underfunding of special education. Our special education professionals are able to present more accurate estimates, but our current town Board of Ed strategy asks that we not use those estimates and instead only budget for known needs of current students at the time of budgeting. This all but assures we start every school year significantly over budget. In recent years, we have cooperated and worked well with this understanding, but in the coming slides, I will demonstrate the problematic trajectory this has set us on. What I hope you'll notice is that without our budget freeze, the variance within our more discretionary accounts comes within 0.2% of our original approved budget. That is even considering a great deal of special education overages. Had we been able to budget utilizing the professional judgment of the team in place, we would likely be returning close to $100,000 to the town. That is extremely accurate for a $52 million budget. The point is, this budget is already tight, and our team controls very well everything that is controllable. So before looking ahead, I want to take a moment to rewind to last year's budget presentation, which included the discussion of the final year of our planned phase-in of investments that were catalyzed by ARP ESSER funds. Over the course of 3 years, we strategically used these grant funds to incrementally incorporate over $1.1 million in new investment in teacher support and development, summer school, technology, and other professional services into our operating budget funds. These things were part of longer-term plans made possible quicker by ARP ESSER grant monies, and your cooperation in rolling out this plan while avoiding a budget cliff was much appreciated. We were clear then that this investment acceleration was a fairly comprehensive list of Horizon projects, and that we would not be coming forward with significant investment requests in the out years, unless related to mandates or student interest. So what you're seeing on this slide is us making good on that promise. These investments previously mentioned also provide our staff and leaders with much work to do to build capacity, optimizing them, and so as Wendy stated, a lack of new products or people does not mean we are not doing anything new. And the team is here, obviously, to answer any questions you might have if you'd like to explore any of these further. So these are our major budget drivers. And it should come as no surprise that with nearly 450 employees, negotiated salary and benefit increases will likely always be our biggest budgetary driver. Together, those two items make up 2.36 of our 3.64 ask. The other 1.2 is coming in overwhelming proportion from special education. Now, just a few slides ago, I outlined that most of our current year's overage is related to special education, and we are again seeing that trend of special ed being a major driver in the new funding requests into next year. In sum, next year's budget is very much about our non-discretionary costs, and the reason I started talking tonight about our current year in relation to next year is because the drivers behind the increase to next year's budget are a reflection of what we are already seeing. When you look at the new requests and increases for next year in relation to the projected actuals for this year, it paints a much different picture. This is not the first year I've presented figures like this, and understandably it is the result of a working agreement our boards have devised to maintain the ask from taxpayers as low as possible. But it's important that we continuously revisit this plan to assure it's the healthiest way to proceed. Year after year, we are consistently spending about 1% more than we are approved for, and we are consistently showing that those overages are not in areas of our control. I will come back to this later, and I hope that we can have a constructive conversation regarding our budgeting strategy. But for now, I'd like to give you some more details on our budget drivers and other areas of note. So, teacher turnover. This area is becoming an area where we are experiencing less and less control. For the public listening tonight, you'll see in the budget summary pages that this line is reported as a negative number because we have for a number of years assumed some amount of savings from teacher retirements and resignations and the hiring of less veteran teachers. So we essentially underfund our salary lines by $200,000. That risk amount hasn't always been $200,000, but it has increased incrementally. What I'd like you to pay close attention to are the lines in red. These represent new hires where there is either no savings or a shortage of funds for the position's entire salary. Every one of those positions is in an area where there is high demand and a short supply for those qualified individuals. When we can make a new hire in such an area and save, we absolutely do. Which is why you will see some of the new hires in special education and social work where salary savings can be captured, but by and large, that is more of an exception. These graphs are only roughly to scale and are meant to more provide a visual, but I wanted to take a moment to explain something new that you'll see in your budget summary sheets, an account called salary negotiations. Up until now, when you viewed salaries, it would, for some salary lines, include a budgeted increase, though that increase had not yet been negotiated through collective bargaining process, and those processes don't begin until the end of the school year. Beginning this year, we have decided to account for the collective sum of all salary increases that have not yet been negotiated into this one account to better position ourselves. This year, we'll be entering into negotiations with our paraeducators, and as we do every year, we will also be determining the increase for our unaffiliated employees, who, as you can see, are not only staffed at central office, but are also some administrators, secretaries, and nurses. Okay. The cost for electricity has risen 41% since the 23-24 school year. And I know we felt it at home, and it has been a major player in the district's budget overage this year, with actual costs ranging from 4 to 5% of our entire operational spend, as you can see in the dramatic spike in the anticipated expenditure for this year. This unbudgeted increase is due entirely to a 58% delivery rate increase that occurred just after the current budget was approved at referendum, and it affected other school districts and municipalities in Connecticut similarly. We do not anticipate that delivery rate to remain, though we do expect an increase. That increase is marked at just over 5% compared to the budgeted amount this year, which is marked by that yellow dot. But in actuality, compared to our anticipated expenditures for this current year, it will likely be a reduction. Health insurance is an enormous factor driving the increase in our non-discretionary spending, and it has become 15% of all budgeted funds, which is 2% more of our entire budget than it was 5 years ago. That represents an additional $2 million just for health insurance benefits. So this is an area of the budget that is growing faster than others. In the 25-26 school year, we have budgeted for a 4.4% increase, which is in line with actual historical expenditures. However, the actuaries have provided estimates as high as 11%, which is indicated by that red dot. As with previous years, this will be a figure that we will keep you well informed on throughout your deliberations. This year, we will spend close to $12 million on special education, which is nearly 22% of our entire operational budget. More importantly, while we see very consistent growth in actual spending, you can see that in the last 3 years, those expenditures have been more inconsistent with our budgeted amount. Now, I want to make it very clear for the public that this is not due to inaccuracies with forecasting or changes in the population of students with special needs. On the contrary, as you can see in the yellow graphs, the number of students qualifying for and receiving special education services is rather steady, if not trending downward. Instead, how we have been asked to budget for special education is to forecast the costs only for students known at the time of budget creation, not for students whose families are in the midst of organizing changes to programming, not for students who have potential or even likely outplacements, and not for students who are currently receiving evaluations that may result in new plans. One of our primary duties as a Board of Ed is to adequately secure funding for all of our students. It is our job to understand the needs of this district more intimately than boards of selectmen and finance. And we would like to begin talking about a collaborative change in our budgeting strategy. We have been cooperative with the town side operations, very much appreciating your effort to minimize what is asked of taxpayers, and we see the value in continuing our agreement as is. On the other hand, we are being asked to budget in a way that conflicts with our principles of aligning budget to educational goals. We have been asked, and we have complied, to essentially underfund special education, and by a lot, and when it's contrary to the predictions of our well-qualified professionals who serve these students. That is what our budget represents. I want to speak plainly that your board has always been supportive of overages in special education to the point where we have not had to implement a mid-year budget freeze until this year. However, with the aforementioned areas of health insurance, energy, and even salaries becoming less and less predictable, we are ever more cognizant of the constraints being placed on our professionals to use our budget to provide the education the Board of Ed has charged them to. And we would like to and need to do better. That is our responsibility as a Board of Ed to the residents of this town. To that end, I believe it to be advantageous to begin budgeting for the costs related to students who, at the very least, have a high likelihood of new programming or transportation needs, and we would like to engage you in those conversations, starting tonight, if possible. So to begin that conversation, I'm sharing with you what we believe to be our anticipated budgetary shortfall if we continue with the current budgeting strategy to start the 2025-2026 school year. This is related only to students with special needs who will likely be or who have been outplaced since we adopted the budget last month. What is still left out by request is any type of contingency for any new student or any kind of changes to services for any student mid-year. What you see here represents the very least of what the Board of Ed would include if we did not have the shared agreement that we do. I can appreciate...
Hey, Rose, it's Brian. It's Brian. I can't
Hey,
see
Brian.
the charts. Can you quote numbers for me, please?
Oh, that's a lot of
I can't see
numbers. The total net budget exposure predicted is $620,511, and that is net of additional excess cost grant.
Can you email that? I could
Yeah,
email
I
it.
will. I can. You want me to email it? Well, I don't have
Want me to
email it
email the
now.
PDF?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's on top of your anticipated budget right now,
Yep.
620,000.
Brian?
Yep.
Okay, that's enough. Okay, yeah, send it to me afterwards, but that's what I needed. Thanks, Rose.
Yep. So what we want and owe the residents of this town is our focus on advancing our educational goals for students, and we believe that requires a great deal of budgetary flexibility than is currently possible. We already have an adopted 25-26 budget, and the amount shown here is the minimum amount advisable to either add to our budget or place in contingency in line with the current agreement. Okay.
Brian, I just emailed you the PDF of the budget presentation.
And Brianna too,
Oh,
please.
yes. What's Brianna's?
Thank you.
Last night.
You just do
Don't
it,
worry.
Board of Finance, just avoid Board of Finance.
Oh, BOF, there you go, that makes it easier.
So, before you finish, I have a
Yeah.
quick question. What flexibility don't you have right now?
We have zero contingency in our budget.
What flexibility, the question is, what flexibility don't you have right now?
So
Because
when-
my God, anything on special ed, we write a check for. Electricity, we write a check for. We write a lot of checks over what we give you. We give you more flexibility, because you know where I'm sitting right now? You can have your 3.5%, you cover everything. Don't come to us for money for special ed. Take the 3.6% or the 4%. We give you all the flexibility we can give you. So,
But you have to remember that when year after year, I mean, we started off when we had this agreement, it was working out very well. We also had additional revenue coming in we had COVID money coming in and other sources or whatever, so it was easier to cover. But for the past couple of years, because of these outplay student costs that were maybe predicted that could happen, the Board of Ed budget looks underfunded every single year, and it's really not a good position for the schools to be in. And we do support and we do provide funding to our ability. This is kind of the first year that we've seen this big of a number that's been beyond what we put in the town side contingency. So I do agree that we need to have a discussion about, maybe we have X number of students that we predict are going to be getting outplaced, that we put some money in to predict that value, knowing that there's a pretty good, you guys have the professional opinion to know where this is heading. So I think we can find a middle ground, we've tried to pull the contingency back so that there's not extra padding in the budgets, because, if a student doesn't need to get outplaced, then it's harder to roll that money back. We can't do that. We know that there's a mandate. So it's been to control the budgets, and we always have this issue of what percentage can we reach that gets a budget passed in this town. When it fails, everybody expects it to go to the chopping block, and we try to avoid that as best as possible. So we do want to support you, and I think that's our intention. I think we
And I
just
think
need to figure out how
that's you're right. That's how this strategy started, and it was working well because it was in the beginning just coming forward with, okay, these were truly students that we didn't know about before April.
Yep.
And then slowly it started turning into, well, there's actually just one student or like a small number of students
Yep.
that have enormous impacts, and then so that one that we didn't predict
Yep.
is just blowing it way out of proportion. So, I think we would rather budget as, okay, these are students and the students that we have, as well as any particular, new ones that might be coming into the budget. We would rather budget for those and only come to you for true emergencies that, they're brand new.
But this is really only the second year that we've seen a big jump, and so I think those first couple of years that we were pulling that contingency back in the town side was a chance to see where does this trend, what does this look like. So we never said that we wouldn't have a conversation about looking at how we budget that. So I don't think we're against having that conversation.
Okay.
And I think this is a great start, right?
Yeah,
there.
I just wanted to be
You're
very
actually telling
clear
us
that
this is what
But,
this
but
is,
how do
this
we
is what to
control
expect.
the fact right now? If we give them 11% on medical, we give them 700,000, we give them an extra $2 million. By law, we can't get any of that money back next year. By law, we can't go below what we give them. So now insurance comes in at 4%, and you'll have no outplacements on your side. So now we're $2 million the wrong way.
But I take a little offense to saying that we don't use the budget how we say we're going to use the budget. When we don't come to you with our hands out for anything else. It has always been managed within our budget. We use it how we say we're going to use it. So it's
We'll talk
so
about
the
that after
premise
I do
of-
my presentation.
the
then,
premise
because my
of having
presentation
us-
will
okay.
show a different story. So
Yeah,
I wasn't going to show mine tonight, but we'll go to mine. So because I think there are ways here.
Yeah, and I think with insurance last year, we had built in maybe an 8 or 9%.
And we
increase.
took it down when you
Yeah.
got the word.
When we
This
got
is
the
what I'm
word, it was
saying.
2%,
But
we took it down.
once
We
it
worked
goes, that's what I'm
together
saying.
on
You have
Yeah.
flexibility. That's where I take offense. Because you budget for 4, if it came in at 30, we'd give you the money. This is flexibility beyond flexibility for you guys. So if you want to assume no risk and take all the money and have all this
We're
thing,
assuming a
take
lot of
it.
risk.
You're not assuming that much. We're assuming the big risks. You're assuming small potatoes on the risk. If you want to assume the risk in any business, then you take the risk. The risk is you might be 500,000 short if you miss on your risk and you come to us and we say, We're not giving it to you. You want to have all the say, but you don't want to have any of the risk. You want to take all the risk, you can take the risk. Again, we'll figure out a number. You're right, I mean, maybe it's 5%, but that number's it. Don't come. If you get 10 extra students, don't come to us.
I don't think it works that way.
I do.
But I don't
That's
think
how it
it's
works.
us and them. I
No,
want to put us back and
it's
say.
like, it's a
us.
risk.
It's together. No, we're all in this together. We're all doing this together.
But
So
if we've had a
We
couple
have-
of years in a row of this trend of underfunding the special education, especially coming into the year knowing that there's a high chance that we're going to have additional students coming in. I think if we can account for those types of numbers a little closer to that, whether, we have a 70% guess that these students are gonna be outplaced, then we put a 70% of that value in, so at least it's less of a shortfall. I don't think, we're still a team and we're still the community. I think we need to support
and I think the town takes the contingency, just that we've been doing so
But
far.
we're down, we're $620,000 down here.
We have to
we're-
plan for it.
$1 million down on the revenue side. We're borrowing from the pension fund, pretty much an over thing, but we're taking from the pension fund, which we've never done, Steve. We've never taken money from funding the pension,
You're
ever.
stating that incorrectly. We're taking not a penny out of the
We're
pension
taking the
fund.
surplus, but the surplus
Nope.
is also
We're
going
not
down.
taking the surplus
But
either.
we are, but that's,
We're changing our contribution to the
Correct.
pension fund, which is overfunded.
which is overfunded.
Right?
But 2
That's-
years
it's
ago it was
clear to understand.
underfunded. 2
We're not
years it was
taking any money
underfunded.
from the
But
pension
today
fund.
we're good,
But
right?
2 years, we were underfunded. It goes with the market. The market was down 600 points today. So we are going into areas together here that we gotta work together. That's why I get lost on the flexibility part of this. That's what really got in my
What
craw,
I, can,
was
how,
the
how
flexibility.
how the agreement started was when we were budgeting for these students. And essentially the narrative then at that time was, well, you don't know if these students are actually gonna be outplaced, and so if we give you this money and it doesn't happen, then we never get the money back and you go spend it somewhere else in your budget. And so then we said, okay, fine, like,
Okay,
you
so
guys
do you
keep
know
all
where
of
that
it.
started?
Yeah. So
That's
that-
how it
I did the
started.
research on that. I did the research on that. And you know what? The year I did the research, we had $497,000 in teacher savings that year. And we had $300,000 in savings on special ed. And we got back $100,000. So that's how this whole process started. It was 7 years ago when I did an analysis. So I'm intimate with these numbers. I'm the one that looked at these numbers. So the year I looked at it, we had a big number of savings in the teacher retirements, and we had a big number of savings in special ed, and we got back 100,000. So this is what that's how this process moved to where it went to.
So if the Board of Finance made a decision to fund the Board of Ed for special ed transportation and these items, and they don't come to fruition, is the board willing to make a commitment that they will
Yes.
return all of that money back to the town?
And how are you going to do the MBR?
Define MBR, I don't know.
The budget, you can't take back any more from
But
No,
we
no,
had
at the end of the
we
year,
had
the
that
school
fund-
district.
No,
can
I'm talking about
return-
next year's budgets.
Yeah, but
Wherever
we
we
had-
sit on, you can't go
But we
below
had
that.
that fund, we had, I know when Colette was the chair of the Board of Ed, there was like, I don't know, there was a year where there was about $80,000 left over, and that got rolled into a fund that was able to, the non-lapsing fund, why wouldn't we be able to
Yeah, we create
utilize
the
something
non-lapsing.
like that? Then
And
it's
also,
a-
there is a process where you can go to the state and say to the state, we're not underfunding the schools. They didn't need this money, they gave it back, here's their new real budget. You can go through that process with
Is
the
there any
state.
chance to have like a special education bucket that just gets drawn on, that?
A special
The
ed
non-
contingency?
the non- Well, that's
Oh,
the
like a
the
non-lapsing, a
non-lapsing,
true
yeah.
non-lapsing, yeah.
You know, one of the problems we see, and I hear it from people in town, is that people come, why is the Board of Ed over budget? And I say to them,
They're
the
not
Board of
over
Ed is
budget.
not
They're not
over
over
budget.
But
We're all
when
They're
they,
doing
when they see
exactly
this stuff,
what
that's
we
what it looks like,
requested.
and they're not
Right.
sitting at the table
Right.
at these meetings
Right,
listening to.
they're
the-
not, but they
Exactly.
see it and they
Yeah.
perceive
And
it.
maybe,
Exactly.
and
Because
maybe
they get
there's
it.
a way to address both concerns, right? The concern of making sure that there is funding available for the students that we have a really, high probability of needing, this number, right, the 620. And not just putting those funds in the Board of Ed budget before that happens. Maybe there's an in-between, like at least to start this conversation and look at it next year, which would, again, hypothetical, if we were to say to the town, can you please at least at a minimum hold this amount of funding in a contingency for these particular special education cases,
Yeah.
right? That we anticipate. And then if we start the school year on September 1 and we're like, guess what? All of these did come to fruition, or 3 out of the 6 of them did, or whatever that looks like. And our need is now really, it is this 620, and then maybe we can ask for that appropriation at that time to true up those special
But
ed.
that's the flexibility you've had.
No,
That's no
no, we're
different.
talking
Well,
about
it's
like
the
literally
timing.
transferring it in
Talk about-
September, so that we're not running the whole school year.
Because then
with
it does
chaos.
give
We don't care when we transfer it. We've never had put a limit on end of the
We've kind of
year.
always talked about doing it at the end of the year.
But we've never said it had to be the end of the year. Marcia and I have always cleaned it up at the end of the year, and you ran it. And no one has ever come to you guys and said freeze it out until we hit this
No,
this
no,
hill.
you're right,
And
you're
So
right.
we have worked fluidly with
Yes.
you. That's where
No,
I guess
you've been very-
I'm
no,
really
you've
at a
been
cross.
very
If you
cooperative.
were to come to us in September, and no one has said we're not going to put it on the town side or figure this out a little bit. No one has said that number is not going to be. What I'm
No,
saying
you're-
is, if we held it on our side, like we've had this agreement, and we've had this agreement in place, if you had 3 people come in September, we can move that money. We
Okay.
can move it with a vote, right, Marcia? I mean, there's no timing on this. We did it at the end of the year as it rolled, and as Eileen said very well, it wasn't a lot of money during the things, and you would come to us, even if we were 400,000 down, you'd come and say, well, we got 300,000 in savings coming over the next few months, so at the end, we're gonna wash $100,000.
So as long as we
Okay.
have budget, the Board of
Yeah.
Selectmen and Board of Finance can make.
Yeah, hey, Glenn, I think there's a little bit of a difference here, right? I think in the prior years, we thought that the school budget would wash out and that we wouldn't
Yes.
have to pay very much, maybe a little bit over on the
Yes.
town side.
Yes.
Yes.
I think as we go into a budget this year, if we think that there's another 620,000 coming, we'll talk through that.
Yes.
But the residents of the town that are voting for the budget needs to know how much we really think the schools are gonna cost us, so that they can make a decision on that number. So we shouldn't be holding a huge amount of contingency for something that we think is a very high probability is gonna come through.
So then what's your
Because
suggestion?
then that, I'm just saying, I think we need to have the school budget closer to what we really think is gonna happen, so that the residents of the town know what they're voting for.
And not to interrupt,
we
but
just
I
gotta
have
be
to get to
careful
my
about
Board
that.
of Selectmen.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
And if we know there's these 3 or 4 students in the pipeline during budget season, and we don't
Right.
put it in, then on day 1 of, the new September, the school year, or the new budget year even, like, we're already behind.
Or
Right,
we
so we
say
had-
50% of it, or 70% of it is already, we take a calculated risk.
Yeah. Or we say, okay, well, say there's 4 in the pipeline, we say, well, okay, we'll give you 3 for now, and,
And to-
as usual, if anything pops up, of course, we fund it later.
And to be clear, the one line here that says updated estimates with a double asterisk and that the total amount there is 438,140, those are actual changes to existing cases that
for next
we,
year.
that
That
we
were
have
post
learned
budget
about in the
adoption,
the
yeah.
last month. One is so and it's not just one student, it's a handful of students, largely changes in transportation based on changes to, student needs. But those are real, true costs that we learned about in the last 4 or 5 weeks.
So that 438 already is.
Is a definite.
That's a definite, that
Yeah.
needs to be added into
Yeah.
this budget
Unless something changes,
between now and.
So-
between now and the start of school year.
I guess the whole thing, it's a game of risk, right? We need to know how high the risk is. Are we truly thinking 90% of it is going to come through? And if that's the case, then we should definitely put it in the budget.
What are percentage of two? That
4.6.
2.52.
You gotta move it if you're moving their budget for 2/3%.
Yeah.
More than that.
It's more than that.
Yeah, you're moving it a percent.
What
You're moving it
is
a full point.
comfortable
1%, yeah.
contingency?
You're moving it a full point. So you're gonna go from 4.05 to 5.05.
And
And
you're talking-
when we go, and you know how you're saying, and Brian, you know how you're saying that, the town's not gonna pass a 5.05 school budget. I mean, we can put it out there.
But that's the point,
That
right?
ain't gonna happen.
The message we had up until this point is we made a big investment in education last year, and this year we're scaling back. I don't think given what we're seeing right now, I don't think that's the actual truthful message. So I don't wanna have an untruthful message to the town. There's gonna be a pretty big investment, it's gonna be special ed, it sounds like.
But
If
the
it is,
change
it
from
is, right?
actual.
We gotta be clear to the town.
But the change from actual, which again,
We created some of this problem, I get it.
yeah,
I get that, right? I know what you're saying, because we called it contingency,
All right,
so
so the
when they go to
problem-
the number.
the problem
we did-
started last
the Board
year,
of the Board of Finance created some of this optics, absolutely, I mean, but.
But the
It
numbers
was
were not
together,
that
that
big
was just
before.
collaboration.
but the,
It was
but the
everybody.
total, the
Yeah.
town, I mean, the town side, because
Yeah.
that money, some of that money was in contingency.
Right.
So it, I mean, it's already been voted on by the taxpayers, it just wasn't allocated on the school
Right.
side.
And in good faith, we wanted to use the most actual numbers we could at the time.
Mhm.
But, and now when students, enter into some of the needs, it just got so costly that, we weren't expecting such big budget hits each time.
And as Brian has pointed out, the acceleration trends in this area, they're not great. I mean, Phil, I know that you think about this all the time, like how can the district be mobile, flexible, creative?
Right, what can we do if it's transition programs like other districts have?
Right.
Do we start looking at that? Do we start looking at alternative high school in district, in terms of thinking ahead? I will also say, and I appreciate everyone's thoughts tonight, is that the real behind the scenes piece on this, if you see, is the transportation. We are not, in some cases, close to a lot of outplaced schools as Creek might be for Hartford County, or in New Haven with ACES, where you're 15 minutes away. Many of the schools that we end up after a lot of thought and studying of should we, shouldn't we, are we there, are not in Bethel. They're not in Danbury necessarily. And the amount of schools that fit the need of these students are not close.
I actually did like a
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm
slide on that.
stepping on you. But that I always go back to, there's transition and there's those pieces of 18 to 22, but there's also the transportation piece, which makes things look even bigger than they already are because of the nature of our proximity to the programs that the students need. Sorry, Rosa.
No, not at all. I'm glad that that came in. But I do have a lot of other slides to go through, so yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so in the spirit of discussing the needs of all of our students, I include this slide to illustrate the changing demographics of our community, because we're not just here to manage our major budget drivers, but to understand the makeup of our school community, how ready our students are to learn and to be responsive to it all. So it's easy to be critical of a growing budget of this size, but our Board of Education exists to understand the complexities of what it takes to educate all of our students in our community, given the unique combination of resources that we have. I hope we can all agree that every student, regardless of socioeconomic status or what language they happen to have learned first, can find a quality free education where they can thrive right here in Brookfield. Our MLL, or multilingual learner population, is growing, but more slowly than in years past. It's not because new students are not entering the system, in fact many are every year, but rather because we are successfully graduating students from these supports as they grow in English language literacy. Our MLL students come from all over the world and collectively speak dozens of languages, although Spanish and Portuguese are the subpopulations with the greatest numbers. To address an immediate need in this area, you'll remember one of our new investments is funding to make the current part-time Portuguese teacher a full-time role. What is probably more glaring in front of you is the fact that today in Brookfield, 1 in every 4 students is receiving free or reduced lunch, and well over 100 years of research has supported the idea that students facing economic hardship face a greater challenge accessing positive literacy environments, as well as experiences and resources that encourage fundamental academic skills. They also tend to have lower career-related self-efficacy and higher levels of toxic stress that can lead to learning, behavioral, and health issues. Our curriculum doesn't reach every student the same way or always as meaningfully as we want, but being cognizant of this has led us to support initiatives that differentiate learning and shore up Tier 1 primary classroom instruction that reaches all of our students directly from the teachers with whom they have relationships. In sum, although this is not the last slide, I've explained the challenges, trends, and budget estimate work on salaries, electricity, health insurance, and special education, which make up over 97% of our expenses. They are the main storyline of this current and future budgets and are shown here in shades of blue. The small sliver that remains in yellow isn't even entirely discretionary, as it contains other employee benefits, student transportation, and utilities. The point I return to is that the team who operationalize and manage these funds day to day have done so exceptionally well. And we as a board not only oversee their hard work throughout the budget construction process, but throughout the entire year. We are in a perpetual state of budget review and deliberation. Notwithstanding multiple reports in the fall regarding enrollment and the adoption of the budget goals, both of which begin to formulate budget drivers, the full budget proposal was first presented to the Board of Ed in early December with the explicit intent to give members additional time to review. This is likely the earliest presentation of its kind in the state. Additionally, the Finance Subcommittee discussed and inspected the budget proposal line item by line item over 4 regular and special meetings and through assigned reviews to be completed by each member. All questions from any board member were logged into what resulted in a 32-page document that is available for the public on our website. In reflection of 2 meetings for public participation and 11 budget blast communications to parents, the board, again since early December and continuing to this day, has had a standing agenda item to discuss or make changes to the budget proposal. At our January meeting, we engaged in a robust conversation about practice, but the board as a whole supports the proposal as is and the expertise of our educational leaders to carry out the goals and objectives we have set. So, I wanted to take a moment to correct some misunderstandings about our achievement data and provide some much needed context. We all know that data can be cherry-picked, misinterpreted, or just viewed without the appropriate contextual information. And when you're comparing school districts with a great many differing factors, it becomes all too easy to compare apples and oranges. The Next Generation Accountability Index was intentionally designed to cut through that noise and provide Connecticut with a holistic story of each school district's performance. The single Accountability Index score is based on subscores in academic achievement against standards, growth in core areas, college and career readiness, and post-secondary entrance, and others, as well as contextualizing it alongside absenteeism and access to the arts. The state sets targets for each subscore as well as an overall score, and results are published and updated regularly. There is complete transparency. The idea of DERGs, is somewhat outdated, but I know it's a reference people prefer. Still, looking at the list of DERG B schools, Brookfield is clearly towards the bottom in per pupil spending, and we are about middle of the road for our accountability index score. I have supplementary slides we can go through if you'd like to explore some of the nuances, but the narrative that we are not efficiently prioritizing our funds for student achievement is categorically untrue. I could somewhat understand the criticism if we were, say, Fairfield or New Fairfield or Newtown or any one of the clear majority of districts in the DERG whose expenditure ranking was higher than their accountability ranking. But I will only say somewhat, because in reality we have to understand the data we're looking at. Within DERG rankings are not a fair comparison and an incredibly poor tool to evaluate fiscal responsibility. Each one of these districts has their own unique challenges and strengths, town government structure, student body makeup, political ideology, and socioeconomics. And the rankings are not static. There will be some changes year to year due to variations in any one or all of the factors I mentioned. District reference groups were never meant to provide an apples-to-apples comparison of districts that are inherently very different. Take, for example, Farmington, who spent $300 less per student as Brookfield but achieved a higher mark in their accountability score by a single point. They're in the same DERG as us, but let's look closer at some of the things that could make Farmington different. For one, there is a slightly larger college-educated population, and the relationship between parental education and child academic success has long been reported as a strong positive correlation. Now, whether that relates to better navigation of the school system, cultural capital, school involvement, access to educational resources outside of school, or just the types of conversations that happen around the dinner table, is far beyond the scope of this meeting. Nevertheless, it is undeniably a factor in student achievement. Additionally, Farmington's per capita income is slightly higher, yet their cost of living and labor is quite a bit lower. In fact, Farmington has a lower cost of living than the state average, while Brookfield is 8% above. Where we clearly beat Farmington in rankings is for being a more expensive place to live and work. The point is that while many districts have been grouped together in DERG B, there is a hidden cost for living and operating in Fairfield County. And this is to build your point. What can seem like minor differences between districts can translate to real costs. Take, for example, the cost for transporting our out-of-district students. I will preface this slide by saying that this in no way represents a complete list of schools and programs that either district utilizes for outplacement-related services. And to control for some of that, I focus on just the resources available to Brookfield and Farmington within our respective RESCs, which are Regional Educational Service Centers. These are alliances that were formed intentionally to help neighboring districts share resources and generate cost savings. Brookfield is part of EdAdvance, which covers northern Fairfield County on the western edge of the state, all the way up to the Massachusetts border. Farmington is part of CREC, the Capital Region Education Council, which includes districts in the greater Hartford area. Both RESCs have similar number of member districts, but the geography is a bit different, and on average, Brookfield is 50% farther to specialized schools and programs compared to Farmington. Again, I'm not claiming that geography is the sole reason we have high transportation costs for our out-of-district students, but this, combined with the demographic data I showed on the previous slide, is all simply meant to shed light on some of the many factors that contribute to higher costs that have nothing to do with instructional or leadership practices. Factors that should be universally understood as part of the contextual complexity, but has been left out of these conversations. When it comes to revenue, there are important differences as well. I have included 2 fellow DIRG-B districts as well as 2 other districts in Fairfield County that are not in our DIRG. What you'll notice among DIRG-B schools is only slight differences in state and federal funding, which makes sense because despite the differences I mentioned, we are in the same socioeconomic bucket, according to the state, as Farmington and Trumbull. Where the most noticeable differences lie is in tuition and other revenue, of which we have virtually nothing at 0.3% of our operating funds. Farmington, on the other hand, receives over $2 million in tuition and other revenue that likely goes directly towards the same, most volatile area of all Connecticut school budgets, special education. This piece of revenue not only directly lessens the need for local funding, but helps stabilize a significant portion of their budget. And we see other advantageous components of Farmington's budget when you look at how they fund health insurance. While every year Brookfield expects a wide range of increases, this year it could be anywhere between 4 and 11%, a swing worth nearly $1 million, Farmington is self-insured, and by utilizing an internal service fund, they've steadied their increase to that of half of ours over the past decade, while at the same time increasing their educational budget. These are just a couple of pieces to a larger puzzle, zoomed in on a few cherry-picked districts, but they directly speak to 2 of our major budget drivers, and me providing this level of detailed context about how we should interpret hyper-focused data comparing districts should be more well understood without saying. So one of the most important roles of a Board of Education is to present the funding needs of students within a more long-term, coherent plan, as well as oversee the operationalization of those funds as a vehicle for student achievement progress. We believe the budget we've adopted, and we have brought it forward for your consideration, and we believe it accomplishes our goals. However, what we see as the biggest barriers to our success next year with this budget, and in future years with any budget, is not too much of anything, but simply a need for more stability within the most impactful areas of our budget. We believe we've been responsive to your request for a tight, well-inspected, efficient budget that also moves the district forward. Each Board of Education member serves for the sole purpose of putting students first, so as much, and perhaps more than you, we don't want any waste in our budget. We feel this is the budget we want for the students of Brookfield, and would love to engage in conversations on different town budgeting strategies to help you understand how they can impact our students. But what I hope I've explained well enough is that we have presented a budget that has been thoroughly considered, is efficacious, well-controlled, and understood by our district leaders and board. Where we hope your role can help us understand the affordability of this budget, we can assure you and the public that every dollar we do receive is used in the best way for our students that we know to be possible within this town. I don't anticipate the Board of Finance intimately understanding the complexities of education in Connecticut, and I'm also aware that my position restricts a full understanding of the town's financial position and ability to fund this request. Nevertheless, I hope you appreciate our advocacy and trust that the Board of Ed conversations regarding the specific allocation and use of funds in light of your deliberations has always remained on the table as part of our regular agendas. While I hope we can focus our attention to the funds in blue and how to better budget for them, We will always use the sliver in yellow to capitalize on the philosophies and experience of our educational experts for the betterment of our students. Thank you for your time and attention, and we welcome any questions you have.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yes, very good, that was,
Where did you get your data from?
Ed site.
Because Ed site, I get $20,222 for Brookfield pupil spending, not 19,000. And I also get, we're ranked like 10th in the spending when I did my research on Ed site. So my numbers from the Ed site website differ from your numbers significantly, to the point of you move 4 positions up or 5
Maybe it was
positions.
just a different year that we were looking
Yeah,
at.
I looked at it today, or last week.
The 2000.
No, I mean in relation to the other
So
other towns.
if I were to do the same ranking, okay, and I did my research, total spend per student is 20,222,
I did see
which
that.
makes us 13 out of 21. Not as high, not as low as you have it there. There's South Simsbury, Farmington, Woodbridge, Cheshire, Monroe, Orange, and Trumbull all underneath us on the Ed site thing. Then if I go to the funding the district, we're 10 out of 21. When I go to the administration costs, we're 9 out of 21 in our DIRG. Now, you said, oh, we can't match DIRGs, we can't do DIRGs. I've been on this Board of Finance now for 8 years, and the DIRG has always been the comparison point. The Board of Ed has always come to us and said, the DIRG, the DIRG, the DIRG, and all of a sudden the DIRG doesn't mean anything. So
Well,
now,
it's one piece of the context.
transportation costs, we're 6 out of 21 in our DIRG. We're the highest. Special ed outplacement, we're 3rd highest in the state with special ed outplacement per student. We have 169,000 on the Ed site data website. So then I go to use Farmington, and I gave Wendy a little heads up. Farmington puts out this thing called Farmington Public Schools Excellence in Fiscal Management Expenditure Rankings. 121 out of all Connecticut districts in instruction, 137 of all Connecticut districts in general administration, 110. The lower the scores, the better fiscally, right? So this is 110 out of the central and other services, 132 out of districts in student transportation, 134 of all Connecticut districts purchase services, 107 in per pupil expenditures FPS. So they're putting forth this excellence. And if I were to show you the graph, the amount of expenditures versus your test grades, Farmington, it's a whole different thing. And what?
But I think you're missing the contextual piece, which is, what I was trying to demonstrate is that there are a great number of factors that can affect that. It's not every dollar you spend you get higher
So-
test scores. So now if you're a particular district that is, let's say Greenwich, and they're spending nearly $30,000 per student, they're probably always going to be at the top of the DIRG, but they might go between 1 and 2, right? When you talk about like the middle of that, where there's not a lot of variability within those districts, there's a few $1,000s.
You're right.
They're
That I
going
agree
to
with
they're
you.
going to
It's a
kind of
very tight
shuffle
window.
every single year,
Very tight window,
and it has
absolutely.
nothing to do with how much money they spend.
But then if I go to niche and you look at the school rankings, Glastonbury 6, Greenwich 7, Madison is 8, Farmington is 9, Avon is 10, Fairfield's 11, Cheshire is 12,
But
District
niche
5.
should be
So niche is also does a lot of studies. I mean, you can't just discount niche and throw it out. So out of our DIRG, we're second to last in our DIRG. So I sort of get lost in this, what we're doing here a little bit, like these
Can I
numbers. You threw
Yeah.
Farmington.
Yeah.
Can I speak just a little bit to what you might be seeing in Farmington? Because I got the heads up too that Farmington was being looked at, right? And so there's 3, if you look at the DIRGs, and I'm not, in DIRG B, I'm not including Region 5, which is Amity, it's a
Yes,
regional school, and
secondary.
I'm not including Orange and Woodbridge, because they're not
I
a
couldn't
pre-K,
find
right?
anything on them either.
Yeah, so I just took
Bro,
them out.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're
perfect.
So out of the DIRG B, I'm using 18 towns.
Okay, so that's why I looked a little lower.
Perfect,
So you-
yeah, that's-
So you used 18, I used 21.
Yep. You might have, you could have had Orange in there,
Okay.
but anyway, so I agree with you. Farmington, Trumbull, and Madison both have a per pupil expenditure that is, if you were to chart them, their per pupil expenditure is lower than their test score, right? So they have like, if you want to think of return on investment, it's
But
it's
see,
good.
where are you getting,
So-
no, before you finish, where are
Yeah.
you getting these test scores? Because I'll be honest with you, on the test scores, when I go to Ed's site, we're second lowest to New Fairfield.
So I'm looking
where-
at the,
what data
that,
is this from?
that accountability score on Ed site, that,
Okay.
that one number ranking, that, these numbers
That
right
number
here.
right there.
Mhm.
The 81.6. So I matched to you with the Ed site per pupil expenditure, the 20,222.
So where
That's
did we
from
get the
that's from
18,000?
so that's from 2022-23. It looks like yours are 2023-24. So it's different years of data, but it's really looks very, very similar. What it looks like for Brookfield, you don't want to necessarily be some of these districts, and I hope none of
No,
the
just, you
districts
don't
are
have to
looking
name
at us.
any, don't.
But
go
there's
ahead.
many districts where their per pupil expenditure is a lot higher than ours. It's shown right here, where their accountability score is lower than ours. So we are right there where we can be. Now, Farmington, Rosa mentioned it with the insurance. They're self-funded for their insurance. So they have a roughly 2,000 more students than we do. So all of their costs, and their fixed costs, right? The insurance is
Spread out over students.
spread out over many more students, almost twice the number of students.
Okay.
They have an increase in their 25-26 proposed budget of health insurance in the amount of $11,206.
Oh my gosh.
Newtown's fighting the same thing.
So, in the last 1, 2, 3, 4 years, Farmington has realized a savings in health insurance of over $500,000. Whereas we are realizing just this year, this budget proposal, if we were to, increase it to the 11%, it's a total of $800,000, right? So it's very hard to compare. Like, that is financial excellence, of course, but they can now have a growth in their budget over 9 years. Their total budget increased 29.7%. Our total budget increased 28.65%. But their health insurance increased 31.7%. Our health insurance in that same time period increased 75.7%. So while our budget isn't ballooning, right, to meet that 75% increase, we are having to take those resources to fund fixed costs largely. And Farmington have those funds that they can use for other things. A lot more, resources for programming and teaching, teaching kids. So it's all, yes.
You're
it's
not
a-
comparing, yes.
It's really hard to compare those two things.
Can I make a point though? But
I can share this with you if you want to
your,
No, you've proved it
your,
to me. I
your
don't need to share.
questions,
You proved it to me.
I would say your questions that hung in the air, unasked, but omnipresent, Glenn, did prompt a lot of thinking on our part. Like, where are the places where we could, knowing all these contextual factors, that it's hard to compare districts because their stories are so
Right.
different. We were like, wow, I wonder how we could move some of these pieces, in the coming years to address some root issues. And I think it's important to circle back to one of the places that we started with this, about the long-term investments that we're gonna see playing out and hopefully bearing fruit in the next couple of years, like with the math instruction and the changes that Dr. Mann and Dr. P have made with the scheduling to accommodate more comprehensive math instruction for our littlest folks. And that these are the kinds of changes that our leadership is seeing and making, and that are cost neutral, but are steps in the right direction to change some of these numbers.
And while we can't change in this current proposal going forward, Ellen keeps asking the same great question, where's that $600,000 gonna come from? We just got the increase on insurance. We're already thinking for probably 2 years down the road, it might not be as fast as 1 year down the road. Bill's working with the team that he has in place for strategic planning and starting to think about what can we, because we now have stability and leadership in special education that we haven't had in a couple of years, where he can now get his roots set there and now think through, okay, I've got my team in place, what can we do to bring some more students in-house, even if it's not a lot, but a small program that might save a significant amount of money on transportation and those kinds of things. At the same time, we just talked with Marcia and Steve, Casey and I have a weekly meeting, we were talking about what are some things we can start to think about with insurance, because it's an outrageous increase that continues to happen. and
We
it's
don't
not-
know what it is, but I do appreciate what you're saying. I do
Yeah,
appreciate exactly what
I
you're
just want you
saying.
to
I
know,
know, I
future, we
appreciate
were
what you're
thinking
saying.
about that, Glenn.
So I would say, because I gotta tell you, I spent hundreds of hours looking at school budgets recently. Go to the Fairfield, Connecticut, school budget. They have serving our students in-house a chart. It says outplaced in-district cost comparisons, and it shows cost avoidance of greater than $16 million. So they are putting into their budget, they already have a chart in here on how they're looking to handle this problem, which is everybody's problem. I'm not saying you guys are doing it wrong either, so I mean, don't take it that way. But it is everybody's problem. But Fairfield is coming with a serving, how do we do this? How do we?
Revenue, how do we, yeah.
And it's a cost avoidance, they put in their budget of 16 million. I guess my angst is, and I know Eileen, is 626,000. We're down $1 million in Steve's budget of revenue. We are gonna push a budget that's gonna fail, and I've always been a proponent of take the budget and own control of it so it passes, because once it fails, it can go down a slope where it's gonna not be good, and now we're making drastic cuts. We're now cutting to approve a vote instead of cutting to figure it out. My thing is also is all of these costs that are uncontrollable, the word status quo goes into place, and it's like, status quo is one thing, we gotta get initiatives going, almost like you just spoke to. Status quo isn't cutting it right now, because the costs are going, we gotta decide on initiatives, and how do we drive this, how do we attack these problems, how do we attack transportation? Like you say, how do we handle special ed a little more in-house, and I don't know if we can.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that either, I'm not, and Rosie, you're absolutely right, I'm not an educator, all right, I'm not even close, but from a finance point of view, we're getting to a point where we're gonna push the town, and the town's gonna push back.
Yeah.
And especially in today's climate, and the political climate. The political climate has now cut everything, I mean, we're firing departments in the government, I mean, that's the political climate that won the election. And once we get out of that control, we're in bad shape. And I'm gonna tell you, if we added in, and I heard Eileen, and I know we should do better, and part of that's our fault, but now we're up over 5 on your side, and I've done that research in the graphs, and I know, Rosa, you said you saw the graph. We hit 4% twice with your budget recently, and it failed. Those are the only 2 years we failed budgets. When we hit your 4% line, we failed. Now, Eileen said 1 year we only took a little bit of money. We said, not took it, but I mean, in order to get the budget to pass, I think this climate's more difficult, and that's where you feel my angst, I guess, and my anger is, I don't know how to navigate this, and for the first time, I don't know personally how to navigate through this budget, because we are taking from the pension contributions, and yes, we're overfunded, but this is the first time in my 8 years we've taken from a pension contribution to fund the budget, and as we creep up to 5%, and we're using this, what happens if the market does go down? Next year, you're gonna need 7% to run your business. And we're not gonna have it. And that's where I guess my fear is, and that anger I guess you feel is, I can't see the numbers. So that's why we gotta get initiatives going, and we gotta figure this out. So, all right, Nahid, I've spoken way too much. Go ahead.
So first, I want to start by saying congratulations on all the hard work that you put in. It shows. It absolutely shows.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna butt back in. I'm gonna take one more point. I apologize. For the town watching, I do want you to understand the school side of this budget. And I had notes. The salaries represent, and this is from my old notes, so if they're off a little bit, I apologize. Is about 77.8% of your request of the 54 million. Special, but if you add in salaries, benefits, transportation, utilities, transportation, it represents 93.2%. This is from notes of the budget. So basically, you guys are dealing with $3.6 million to run the school. You've done a good, there's not a lot of discretionary funds. That's why initiatives become more important. It was also discussed about some of the processes to go through. We streamlined some of your budgets with the reverse of contingencies of the 200,000. It used to take you forever to walk through those numbers. We sort of gave you a number now. You used to say how many, it was like a longer process to go through. And also, on the same thing, and though it's coming up in my notes, it may be wrong, is we let you budget for your special ed. You didn't have to predict your special ed. So that also would take time on your side too, to say, okay, what's the real number? Is it 400,000? Is it 365? Is it 475? So part of your deliberations were shortened by the processes that we've used. So I don't want the town to really think that the budget wasn't gone through as much as it was. I do think maybe some of the questions weren't asked to go a little bit deeper. And you know what, I really like, I did go through your document, and then I'm gonna come back, is I saw your responses back, but we should maybe have a column back for your Board of Ed members to respond back to your responses.
think
So
we
what I
do-
did was, I did go through it like by hand, and
Okay.
if there were any board responses to yours,
Oh,
I
you
put
moved
those
them
as
over?
new,
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
And then, yes, it
So
was
there
like a
is-
back
there
and
is
forth.
quite a-
went.
Because I would
back
follow
and
one part of it, I'd get an answer from you, but it wasn't even, it wasn't an answer I would have accepted, but it wasn't that next thing.
Gotcha.
So, go ahead now, please. Well, you did put in a lot of time.
Yes, so actually, thank you for all the hard work. You guys are amazing. You know, our kids are blessed to have you, the Board of Education and all of you. I think it is a juggle between what can we control and what we cannot control, and most of your stuff is not controllable. So we do the best we can. I think we're in the right direction with all the ideas that you've shared today and the presentation. I feel good.
I have one question about the budget, with the McKinney-Vento, do we know if any of that's gonna be rolled into next year, because I know some of that might be for out.
Could I answer that?
Yeah,
Yes.
please.
So at the end of every year, once students are deemed as needing homeless funding,
Yep,
that carries through to the entire year.
okay,
It then gets reevaluated at the end of the school year.
okay,
So as the housing becomes acquired and the situation changes, that does not roll over year to year. It's a
Okay.
yearly,
I wasn't sure, because I assumed,
Yeah,
I
no.
made the assumption that maybe some of it was
It's-
places that were for there have been some fires in town,
That's-
fires,
and-
that kind
and
of stuff, so maybe
there-
they're
there
not
are-
back.
I think with McKinney-Vento, there are specific instances every year that then make it seem either like, wow, there's not a lot, or
Yeah.
how did we get here?
Yeah.
And we get here through families experiencing that in
Yeah.
a variety of ways,
Yeah.
so.
Is that, and just, I probably know the answer to this, but just for the group, and when does that get reevaluated or assessed? Is
In
it like
May
in the
and
spring
June,
sometime?
May and June,
that
which
you'll-
I've consulted
okay.
with Shipman and Goodwin on that in terms of talking about
Okay.
what the process will
Do we
be.
have any internal predictions that we might need that? I mean, just,
You hope after a year that the family is able to secure housing. And that's
Yeah.
part of this, so Bill's in contact
And,
with
and,
those
and that
families.
also would be reevaluated on if
Okay.
housing has been secured, maybe
Yeah.
housing elsewhere has been secured,
Yeah.
and we sort of
Okay.
look at that versus transporting,
Yeah.
so.
okay. I mean, I think I just wanna echo, I know that the whole team puts in a lot of time and effort into these, and I've been fortunate to sit on the finance committee and make it to most of them, and see, you know, firsthand the questions that get asked and the due diligence that's done in the budget, so I do appreciate that. And I think that this needs to be an ongoing conversation, because, I mean, I think we've sat at the board, as combined boards now for how many years and had really productive conversations, and I think that's the direction that we continue to go in. So I'm glad that we're having this dialogue together.
Mary?
Yeah, and again, thank you for the countless hours you all put into this process for, months and months, and even when you're not in active budget season, I know you're always running numbers in your heads all the time too. And you always put the needs of the students first, and the teachers, and that's great for everybody. Yeah, and let's just, keep talking things through. I know there's been a couple sticky things that mostly are out of your control, and we all just wanna be able to, how can we budget for it better and more cleanly and just make the numbers work better.
Marcia?
Glad I don't have a vote, but incredible data in that presentation. You always
I'm
make me look
impressed.
like a slacker.
I was impressed by the data, no lie. So, I think it comes down to affordability, you said it, Rosa. Don't know, we have a lot of data to go through in the next couple of weeks. I don't think the town's gonna pass a 5% budget. I've been here too long to deal with it, and to think we will. So I think, I don't know what to think, how's that? I don't know. On that note, any other things from Rosa, anything from you, Wendy?
No, I will just say, thank you for being receptive of, maybe, reevaluating how we're budgeting. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to that conversation continuing. And, yeah, I mean, it does come down to affordability, and we understand you know, that the town's gonna decide, you know, essentially what they're willing to afford, but, you know, I hope, I'm sure Wendy will sort of say that, like, this is, you know, this is the budget that we as a board stand behind, and, you know, we hope that we've communicated what we need clearly, and if it comes down to affordability, that's, you know, that's where we're at nowadays. So.
I'd just like to end by saying I appreciate the emphasis on how we can use initiatives and our own creativity and the expertise, like, in the room. The answers are in the room. Like, how can we think a little bit differently? Maybe, ironically, it'll take some investment to save money on the back end. But I think there's an appetite on our side to work towards solutions to that end.
Mm-hmm.
And can I just also add that I think this year we've had several meetings, and I see that you're bringing that back to us with much more information, much more, you know, hasn't that been? So we really appreciate that you're digging in and you're finding the answers and you're bringing it back to us, which is helping us all in planning better.
And there's no surprises ever, which is
No,
very,
they're
very
not.
helpful.
Yes, they're not, so.
Well, we
that's
were
good.
encouraged to do our homework.
Casey?
No, I think this has been a very productive conversation, and a very important conversation. And I think, you know, we'll probably be seeing each other a lot this time of year.
Anna, you wanna?
I
Evan?
appreciate the opportunity to be part of the conversation and discussion, and I'm happy to share any information that can shed greater light on the importance of the DNA of the district, which is curriculum instruction and assessment. It's what everything is built around, and so if there's an opportunity for me to return or clarify anything, and share any other documents, I'm perfectly happy to do that.
John, close it out.
A big thank you to all of you for all the work you put in. You're put in a very challenging position with all the different departments you have to work with. So that's first and foremost, grateful for your service. The other part is we use the word not in our control, and that's accurate. But we talked about two very volatile areas that many times when we're in the fight, they're not in our control, like special education costs, which are very volatile, and we just talked about insurance. We need to, on our end, get into the laboratory and figure out what are other districts doing, what can we do, how can we work together, and figure out a different path, because it is not sustainable at the rate it's increasing, and the town can't afford it. So while we can't make, you know, big adjustments right now, and hard decisions likely will have to be made at this table, and then delivered back to us, and we'll have to figure things out to service our students. It's important to know that you have, you know, people here on the board and on the team, the great team sitting behind me. We don't want to put this burden on the taxpayers. We want to do it as efficiently as possible and give you the best return on investment, you know, Brookfield bargain, if you will, as we can. So we want to do that. But thank you, truly,
All
thank you.
right, I will do something here since it's special. I'll open it up to the floor. Any of y'all, you sat through the meeting, you heard all the noise, you wanna add something, speak freely. Go ahead, here's your opportunity. I'm opening the floor. No? I mean, you can speak freely.
Can I just say thank you for the opportunity to clarify, and Rose's presentation was in keeping with my goal of fiscal responsibility, even though it might not feel like it sometimes with the numbers we see.
You don't have to thank us for our time. We're here to do this right. I mean,
But the opportunity, as Dr. Mann said, the opportunity to speak and to clarify, I do appreciate that.
I appreciate that too.
It was nice to meet you in person.
Nice to meet
I
you.
prefer to name us.
Again, I'll close it as, I'm real scared about these numbers. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's a matter of, and I've been up a lot at night thinking about these numbers and diving into them. And yeah, that, I do some, whatever that word is on the data, I do dig into data, and it doesn't, something's just not there for me, the data. You know what I'm saying? I just had this unease about this going in. And so that's part of my anger and angst, is I'm nervous about it. So that's open and honest, and with that note,
I don't know if I'd call it anger, it's concern.
no, I just get, like, I don't know how to solve a problem. If I don't know how to solve a problem, it stresses me, so that's the
Yeah,
reality.
so it's stress and concern.
Can I just say, if you guys, I hope you guys understand, at least for the administrative part of it here, and obviously, you know, such office, if there's ever those areas like what is it, like, oh my God, you know, this question I have, whatever,
Just ask.
please ask us,
it, I'll get it.
because I know for all of us, when someone puts it into context, or we go to clarify, like, there's a reason why certain things, and obviously with special ed, when you see the outplacements, some of those could just oh my God, someone just moved into the district. You know, like there's reasoning behind it, so if you ever have a question on it that make you feel more comfortable, so there's not so much angst, obviously you reach out and to John, or they can always come to us and we'll give you the reason behind it. I want you to feel comfortable enough that I feel very comfortable having those conversations.
Okay, on a side note, just a quick thing is there a way that we could get more direct help to the classrooms? Can we get creative somehow that way? And I know
Well-
Wendy said an investment. Is there the need for direct help to the classrooms?
You mean like
I will say
I
that
don't- I don't
I
have-
as a Board of Ed, I asked that direct question
Okay.
at one of our budget deliberation meetings, and Anna answered to, I believe, the board's satisfaction, because we voted on this budget that we stand behind, but, I don't know, if you wanna,
I think that you're probably the best person for this. I mean, 45 paras at the elementary school.
Well, right, so just to clarify, the paraeducator piece, paraeducators are generally, assigned based on needs of students, right? I mean, that's for the most part, the vast majority, so actually, Mr. Rowland can speak directly to that. There are some paraeducators who are employed as support. But we don't, that's not really, the main purpose of a paraeducator, right? So we would look for extra support in the function of, our instructional coaches were one of the, that was kind of the main investment over the last 3 years in terms of supporting teachers so that they can have the most influential and effective and efficacious instructional strategies at tier 1. So we all think of, in our public education realm, we think of instruction in kind of 3 tiers, right? And so every student is afforded tier 1 instruction, that is general education in the regular classroom, regardless of the age level. And that's where the biggest bang for your buck is, because all students are not only, that's where they all participate, but they're also all afforded a free and appropriate education, public education, right? And so irrespective of their designation or their level of need or whatever the case may be. So as part of special education law, students have to be in the least restrictive environment. So they are a part of those regular education classrooms. So if you invest in the instructional practices, which is founded on the curriculum, in that tier 1, that's where the largest support is going to have the biggest effect. So what you want to do is make sure that you have a written curriculum that is consistent and assured so that all students have access to that written curriculum. You have effective instructional strategies where teachers have the capacity to not only have valuable resources, which the board has generously supported that, and by proxy you, but also the capacity, the professional capacity to differentiate as needed for all students. So that they have, so I guess the support that I would say is needed is in that access to appropriate curriculum that can be differentiated. There are a variety of ways, and I've been talking with Dr. Brill about some forward-thinking ways of gaining greater access, doing more with less, but you do need some people in the capacity to be able to affect the greatest change, which goes back to those curriculum support teachers, or we did have instructional coaches, as well as the leadership, right? Empowering the leadership so that they can be creative with the way that they use their schedule and provide in-house time for professional learning. Like one of the things that each one of these principals has done a masterful job with is affording teachers time to collaborate during the school day so that they can, in real time, work on things and then go right into their classrooms and put that work into action. So the support piece is really comes in that way. We use some of the title grant money that we get to support tutors, part-time tutors. We have access to those kinds of things, but as far as I would caution looking at that, at other areas for that level, that tier 1 support.
So the reason for the question is, I've been asked by many people, and part of they watched the Board of Ed meeting as well, is we did all the moving and everything else, is why not more hands-on and less overheads and administration? These are questions getting asked to me, and that's not, and then at the meeting, John said he could look at it, but the board and Rosa absolutely nailed it, voted 4-3, and the board votes as one vote. So the board then approved the process.
So,
But I'm saying for vote resistance, not for change of law. I'm saying is if this is a contention of the vote resistance.
this is, it could possibly be that was the content, I think, of our meeting. But where I get angst is having these kind of conversations at a Board of Finance meeting.
Right.
So if honestly, if you are getting calls from people that are saying, you know, I don't like this, refer them to their Board of Education, because this is the plan that we voted for and we support it. And so it shouldn't honestly be deliberated in a Board of Finance meeting, I'll be quite
It
honest,
just
but
was a point that brought up that's coming to me, that's all. You
Well, and I guess my response, my summation of my response is that we do have support built in the form of the curriculum support
Okay.
teachers.
that's all. Public heard it. Case closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Here, hold on a minute here, let me, that was it for you guys, right? We're good? Yep. Thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate all of your time.
Thanks for the time, you folks, for the, I'll leave these here for you. if you-
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
You wanna shut us down for a
Very nice to
minute?
meet you.
I'll make a motion that we take a 5-minute break in a second. All in favor, Naheed? Aye.
Remember you.
Let's shut it down. All right, I'd like to resume our meeting now. I wanted to have Marcia go through some basic numbers quick, so if you could pull up the budget. On the expense side, on the education side, add in, what was it, 626,000, close enough?
Yeah, 620 something. Want to add the whole 100?
Yeah, we're not saving this file, this is just an exercise. Let's add in the whole 620.
Sounds good.
And where do we come at now?
522 is the bottom line.
5.22 overall.
With
With the education.
Yeah.
just the education,
5.2.
that would be a 4.73% tax increase.
Now go to expenditures and,
What do we reduce our contingency? What do we have?
yeah, good call.
Reduce
Yes.
our contingency. 'Cause
No,
if
but
we're-
you still have the same amount of contingency in
But we still
because
need
these are the
contingency.
knowns.
Yeah,
this-
but,
this
yeah,
is-
but,
Won't be as many
but
on
shouldn't
Are
we
you
as
sure?
much? Well, what do we have for, we have 650 for contingency right now?
The Board of Selectmen
Yeah, we
added,
could go down at least 50% on the contingency.
I could down to maybe
we
5.
started with 0.5%.
Okay.
We had 50,000 for some things on ours, the union things
Okay.
and other costs. The Board of Selectmen added 144 for special, to bring it up for special ed, to bring it up to the 650,
Okay.
but then there's no contingency.
So that's the 144 number you're looking for to break it out.
Yeah,
basically.
take that out.
That's what you're saying, right? So if they put in 144 on this side, we just put in the 620 on the other
Yeah, we
side.
can take
Net those out
Yeah,
at a minimum. Right? That's what you're
Yep.
saying, net them out at the minimum.
yeah.
Yep, so now we're down to the 506, and then no extra,
Yep.
or,
Run me through the pension now again, the pension contribution.
so let me pull up that schedule. That,
So, their attendant, so only for Board of Ed, the only thing that they're looking for is the special eds, right? That's
No,
But-
health insurance if we, because
Health
they
insurance.
didn't, they didn't budget 11, they budgeted 4.4.
Okay, or something, yeah.
Steve put it back into 11 though, into their budget.
Oh, we
yep,
did?
Yes,
Oh,
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Um,
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that.
we're taking that out though.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to move that over, I think.
Yeah, we have, I
think-
would move, I mean, if we think electricity is still gonna be, we don't know what electricity is gonna be, and we don't know health insurance, I would carry that contingency
On
the
our
town
side, in the health,
still.
in the health insurance
Yeah.
Yes,
category.
yes.
Yeah,
I
and with
agree, I
with a
agree.
buffer for additional
Yeah.
outplacements, but cover the ones, these 90%, like,
In agreement, we're all in agreement,
Yep.
absolutely. I think we're thinking along, the same thing with the health insurance, put it on the town side, if they
Yep.
need it, we give it.
yeah.
If it goes to
Because it's gonna happen on the
13%, we
town
gotta
side
pay it,
too.
we gotta pay it
Yeah.
if it goes to 13, nobody's shirking
Yeah.
that responsibility or no,
We haven't
cut it.
decided.
But that's what I was trying to say with that MBR, once you put it in the school
Yeah.
budget, it can't be clawed back. So if you do what
Yeah.
ifs on their side, that can't come back. If we do the what ifs on our side, we can what if them.
But,
They need this, they need that.
and
Unless
line-
their what if is like an almost definite, like this kid's in the pipeline during budget season, we know he's going, or she's
Yeah.
going.
And
Joe?
honestly, I mean, so we look at the last couple of years and they had, what was the overage last year? Or what was their budget increase last year between 2023, 24, and 24, 25?
It's been,
Like from,
so last year was actually 2 million.
right, so I mean, honestly, if we added the six, whatever, that we just
600.
added, even if, that's gonna happen, but based on, you're gonna have that much of an increase because of contractual, like, it's not a line item that your your special ed line has to stay that high. That's gonna get eaten up by pay increases anyways. So, you know, we're not gonna really kill ourselves by giving them an extra $650 this year, because you know that that's gonna get eaten up in the following year.
Agree, that I agree with. I'm worried about all the health insurance, the special ed,
Yeah.
all of it stacking, but I think you're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely correct. But I think on the health side, if we kept that on our side, then
Yeah.
we could talk the special ed side again. Should keep it on our, they need, well, if they have it, they should come to us in September, like
but,
they
yeah,
said. You know what?
If-
They
yeah.
have it enrolled, they say right off the gate, we need
Yeah.
$430,000, we appropriate it. We go through the appropriation process.
but I still agree that we start off by giving them that if they have these 90% chance of these kids going in and that 99%
You want it
chance-
in their budget.
I want it in their budget now, and then in September, if they still come and say, we have these kids that are starting now, do the appropriation at the beginning.
And then what happens if they go, only get two? What
No,
happens?
no, I'm saying then we don't have to, like, if they only get 2 of the 3, then they're not gonna be asking us for more money. You know that that number's not going down. They're not building a
Someone else will qualify during the year.
Something's gonna
We're saying
change.
it's 9%, right? We're all,
Yeah.
we're kind of
And Bill's been on
leaning
the ball, like,
towards.
I did think Brian had a good point of, then the townspeople know what they're voting on. They're
Yeah,
voting on the
yeah.
5% increase for the
Yeah,
education.
cool.
I thought that
Yeah.
was helpful.
But yeah, my thought is, that, you know, if the school year starts and those ones that are 90% now are definitive at the beginning of the year, and they get 2 more kids, that they come to us earlier in the year to say, we need this appropriation, because you know that that's not gonna change in the school year. You know, what are the chances that a kid gets outplaced and then gets rolled back within that school year? I don't think that happens very often.
No, it has, but it's not.
Yeah,
I
they
agree.
have to
It's an
literally-
anomaly.
Yeah,
something,
and those
yeah.
and then those other kids
It's not
that
a
do
standard.
come back in during the school year, that buffers the other changes that might
So
happen.
my thought is that we don't do the 100%.
Yeah.
We're looking at 620,000. We share we keep some contingency and, like a percentage. 60% of it we put in their budget, or
Yeah.
70% of it we
Yeah.
put in the budget, and then we have that. So what we're doing is we're
Yeah.
letting go, but we're not
We're-
completely letting
yeah.
go. We're
But-
No, I agree, and I think that they would, my guess is that they would agree to that, like, they had that one that's 99% sure, like, that one I would count as 100. But maybe
yeah.
give us 75% of the other,
of the 6
the other ones, yeah.
But then how do you rework the contingency, because is it that 650, plus we'll still cover anything else that would be
Well,
the,
So we have, hold on, so we have 650 is the full ask. We have 144 of that was the 99%. So we definitely give the 144. And then you have 500 left over. So we give 50 to 70% of that 500, put the rest of that in contingency. So if you do the 50%.
So our contingency is not a huge contingency.
It's not, yeah, so you're
It's a-
still
it's
covering
a-
that 650, but
it's
part
a-
of that's
it's-
gonna be in contingency,
yeah.
part of that goes into their budget. You know, cause even if 2 of those 3 kids go in, then they're gonna end up using that 50% that we give them, but we still keep some of it in contingency, but at least it lessens that blow, and if by chance that a student moves out or something like that, and they have that, you know, at least they're not starting off so negative at the beginning of the school year.
Right, yeah.
But I see, I do understand a lot, but I don't see them starting off as a negative, because we say we're gonna cover it. So it's mentally maybe, but reality is they're not really in a hole.
Well, in the eyes of the town, it looks like
Yeah,
they're already.
I
they're-
get the eyes of the
Yeah,
town,
and the eyes of the
absolutely.
town are more
I
critical.
think what
on
Ryan's, I'm also with Ryan on that, I think it's a clear, transparent picture for the town that, hey, education is 5%.
Mhm.
It's not 3 point.
Okay.
This part, it's a huge number, $600,000. Now we're putting that in, then we have to put another 400,000 for something. Now we have $1 million in and say,
And if
that's it.
townspeople know how truly expensive it is, we'll start advocating for it at the state level. Start, help us.
It's the truth.
If you
This
don't-
is what
yeah,
it
I
is.
haven't had a
It
chance
is
to
how
look
it
at
is, right? We are,
I wanted to, but I haven't.
it's state mandated, these are things that we have to do, and this is what it is. So,
By the way, Vermont vetoed that too.
All right,
Yeah,
let's go through this
for
OPEB
special
quick,
ed.
and then let's go through one
I
other
mean, they
thing.
can still over.
So go ahead, Marcia,
He
walk
said
us
they
through
didn't-
this.
state doesn't have the money.
This is the retirement, this we need to understand, so.
We had, just in rough numbers, that we had a payment that we had to pay in for the actuary determined annual contribution to our pension of $1.2 million. Our pension has been getting some great numbers, it's 110% funded. That number went down by about $700,000 that we don't have to pay in. And in our original budgets, that we thought, great, let's take that 650 or 666, whatever it is, and pay it into OPEB instead. We've only been paying 100 into OPEB. So the Board of Ed put it so that the pension OPEB funding in their budget was flat. Our pension OPEB funding in ours was flat. Whatever it wasn't going into pension went into OPEB. This is the health insurance in the original budget, and this is the OPEB on the Board of Ed side. This is on our side, because we paid much more of the pension contribution. And so we had 11,700,000 between the health insurance and OPEB. Well, that's the health insurance at the average increase. If we had to go up to 11%, they needed 489,000 more. We needed 166,000 more. And so we took all the OPEB out of their budget, and we added, Steve, in the first selectman's budget, added 389,000 to their budget. We took the OPEB out of ours, and we took out 389,000 out of our budget. And just that transfer kind of made it flat. You'll see Steve's budget is 219 because we just couldn't afford all the stuff, and we had to share some of the pain. So we made a bunch of cuts, and he cut 170,000 out of their budget, which was less than the percent that we cut out of ours. And so that's how it looks like Steve added 219. It was adding for health insurance, removing the OPEB extra contribution, and a cut of 170.
So now go to the actual budget line again, please. Where the pension contribution history is.
There's a 219 corrected pension contribution history.
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I found it.
I had mixed, I had just
Hiccup.
posted them backwards.
I asked why the number was there, it didn't look right, and she was like, okay, it doesn't belong there.
So here's the pension contribution, the 822, each of the last 3
That's what we've been
years.
paying, 822.
Wow.
We are overfunded, I mean, I understand that, but 3 years ago, we were below underfunded because of the market. So we went, market changes it, we go below funding. So when Tara wanted to do this a couple years ago, the RBAC committee said, no, we're gonna continue our contributions at the standard contribution. So right now, instead of doing the normal 800, we're gonna only do, how much we're gonna do?
243.
243. That's what scares me, is it's the first time I get we're overfunded. I understand that, but this is the first time since I've been on the board that we've utilized this type of money for that, because again, the ups, the downs of the market, I looked, Marcia, page 94 of our audit book, our audit book shows the history of it. And
that
it goes up to
contributes-
123 one year and then went down to 98. It went up to 110, it went to 112, it went down to 102.
And that
So-
contributes to our AAA rating.
The fact that we're 100% funded, if the market goes down, this would go up, and how much does it go up? And you had asked for an analysis from the actuaries or an estimate. I think what they can give us, and Steve forwarded it to you today,
Oh, I didn't
is
get it.
an Excel spreadsheet that we could do some what-if
Right.
work on it, that what if the investments went down this percent, what would our payments go up?
So I talked to a pensions expert,
Yeah.
and the pension expert said to run a Monte Carlo exercise on this account, which I have no idea what a Monte Carlo
I'm glad
exercise
that you
is.
said that, because I didn't.
So the Monte Carlo says best case, most probable case, worst case.
Okay.
So you can get 3 readings of, gee, okay, best case, it's gonna do great.
Yeah.
You know, we're underfunded by 150,000. Probably what we see the trend going to might be 10% overfunded. Worst case, we're gonna be 10% underfunded. I don't know the numbers,
Yeah.
I'm just throwing them out there.
Yeah.
This is what this test does.
Okay.
So I asked if we could have that run by our actuaries to
Okay.
see what a best case, so we can make an educated guess on, not, I guess it's a guess, educated on that number. Now, I get, again, but look at the markets in the past 2 weeks. I don't know if you looked at your 401k
No,
balance.
I'm trying not to.
I didn't look at
But
that,
it's
but I
not
saw
good.
the markets today.
I
Yeah.
have 20 more years of work, I'm hoping that I recover.
And my fear is, we're starting to build the expenses now based on not paying that. So when
Yeah.
now we don't,
Yeah.
when we have to pay that, all of a sudden, we're gonna have to come up with a full percent. And that's, again, all these fears of mine are, this is another number that scares me, is if we had 600,000 on that line, I'd feel better. You know what I'm saying? But
And that
we're
11% for health insurance is guaranteed, or is that just?
No.
Again, that's
We won't know.
another speculation, right? We don't know
Yeah.
that. So
I asked Marcia about that today. She pinged. So Marcia and I are talking. She's
Yeah.
pinged the people to say, when can we get it? But that's another number. But the fact is too, oh, I'm sorry.
And it still could be higher.
Can you go to Steve's
Look at
sheet quick and then we'll close this out. So go to the cover letter that Steve sent, but here's the data behind it.
All right,
Did we get it today? Or you printed stuff out?
No, this is stuff Diane did before she went on vacation, so I
Okay.
have them
So
like-
right here are the hits and the gains. So we are going to lose, because of the new
Yeah.
formula, $682,000.
Well, why did they phase that in?
That's not my,
that's
that's,
Connecticut, that's
there
again
is,
Connecticut, right?
there is a proposal out there to phase it in a little bit where you can increase by 5%, what we have. So there is
So
something that
this is
might
the
address.
conservative estimate right now?
This is where the law is right
Right
now, and the other one, I don't know if the governor is signing or not.
so then you also have the reduction in our one-time revenues of 826 and the health insurance inflation of 652. So now again, Marcia brought up, we're gonna get 241,000 more. Our interest income, we're gonna think we're gonna get a little bit more than we anticipated, and pension costs is going down, but that's the pension costs again that we're not contributing to as a positive, right, that we're overfunded. So we're still down $933,000. Add on top of that the 622 to Board of Ed, you're looking at $1.5 million. That's why it's something.
And then this 933 was already accounted for in the cover sheet
And
we looked at.
that was what Steve was
summary.
facing as he went into his budget, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so that's already in the summary.
Right.
So
I thought the pension was 600,
Um,
isn't it?
I believe the difference, and I'll look at the difference, I think it's WPCA pays some of it. And some of the pension, that OPEB, was taken up because the defined contribution went up. So there were a few more pieces, it wasn't quite as simple as I had it on the other schedule.
What happens if we, so I just did a quick napkin.
I like it.
So if we give the 144, the 100% of that 99% chance of going into outlays, And then 50% of the remaining 506 puts us at around 400,000. What does that? How much does that move the needle if we're only doing 400 instead of 260 or 620?
620.
So what are the numbers you working at now? You're saying that's it?
I said I did 50% of,
I
and
know.
then we would have to move.
It's still
more
a number, you're not gonna
contingency.
move it though, because
So-
it's still a number you gotta hold.
But-
It's still a number you gotta hold to cover it.
But I just think that, like this year too, right? When the numbers were going really crazy, they found money, and that's part of every budget, every finance,
Absolutely.
right? So I think they will find that money if the year gets to be really bad. But from our side, putting 400 is a decent number. It's like saying, hey, we've got you
Mhm.
covered for this much. If you
Yeah,
need
we're adding
more,
this much in, it's almost.
we've got this
contingency.
covered, you've got this. If you need more, we're right here.
Yeah.
We'll be there. But that kind of makes, that
Moves
kind
the
of
needle a
promotes,
little,
that
yeah.
motivates that whole cycle of, let's find the money ourselves, right? It's a thing.
In prior years doing this, and you know, we've always had sort of the good news that we sort of hid behind, and we've been conservative. This year, we got all this bad news that's coming. Not bad news.
And
I guess bad news
honestly,
is wrong, but I
worry
mean,
about the free and reduced school lunches. I mean, with the cuts that the federal government's doing, what's that going to do? I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen there. We still have to provide that.
Actually, we have some surprises coming our way for sure. We're going to, yeah.
And they're
it's-
not gonna be
it's-
good.
Yeah, and it's not going to be predictable, and it's going to be all, yeah.
but that's why we get
So
up
we
over
need to have a
that
contingency for sure.
5 number though. We're in trouble.
We need to have a good number of we need to have a solid contingency plan in place for
Yeah.
surprises.
So the bottom line is the 5 is not gonna go, I'm telling you now. I mean, especially in this world, right now, the mentality is cut unless I'm very surprised.
Well, I think people are gonna be pretty shocked with some of the cuts and how services are gonna disappear, and they're gonna expect more local government to pick up the pieces.
So our revenue going down is something that the town needs to know, like we have to kind of keep
Well,
talking
they're
about.
finding out now, so I mean,
Yeah,
it's up,
yeah.
it's up there on the board. That's why Marcia put it on the board, it's up there now.
People
Yeah.
watching us.
You know, it doesn't matter, someone will watch it anyway at some
Yeah.
point. These are the points though that when I was driving home, we need initiatives, and that's why I'm saying the status quo work doesn't work anymore. It's now gotta be initiatives, efficiencies, what are the towns doing, what can we do? Now, back to the other thing about the health insurance, that's part of Marcia's plan that she put out. That her procedure policy is something we gotta look at, because that covers some of what we're talking about. And about how to handle the excess money, and when you budget 5%, if we do 11, I think we gotta go back and look at Marcia's document a lot better and understand it more, because part of that whole process is covered by the work Marcia did.
So and what didn't seem to be clear when we were talking is that if we set the budget at 11% and it comes in at 7, it doesn't matter. The 11% is what both sides pay into the fund.
And then we have the 4% buffer that we use next year.
Correct,
when it
and
goes
then the
up.
fund pays a lower price out to the state. So there is, and even on when we talked about it and had the policy that we shared with them, that I think it says it right here. Someplace it says it, but there is no savings, I forgot where I wrote it. It's on that health insurance one that I brought up, that there is no savings under the internal service fund. That so the internal service fund, we say 11%, we pay in 11%, there's
And-
no
and
budget savings.
It doesn't go in the general fund, it goes into this fund.
Correct.
Okay.
So the way Marcia and I talked about this, and she explained it to me, is say we project their bill at 2,000 a month, and it only comes in at 1,000 a month. They're still paying at 2,000 if we give them
Oh,
that.
they're still.
No, so if we allotted them the 2,000 a month
Yeah.
for health insurance.
Yeah.
So we say, here's your money in your budget, and their bills, and it's not 1,000, I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
and their bill's 1,000 a month. They're still on the hook to pay 2,000 a month because that's what they were allocated. That's what Marcia's
Yeah.
saying, they're not getting the savings of that. The bill would still be the amount we allocated.
Yep.
So they would have to pay
So
what we
it's still sit
allocate,
in their budget, it's just that they have to,
pay it back on a monthly basis, no matter what
Okay.
the number is. So in other words, their mortgage is still the $1 million that we gave them, even though
it's
they.
like, it's like the fuel, it's like the the fuel plan, or the budget plan, where you pay a set amount every month, because even if you're not going to use it, because
But
it
then the
evens it
internal
out.
service fund rotates for the coming
So then
year.
the
We
surplus
have-
is
we have
applied to next
surplus.
year,
Right.
and when it reaches a certain percentage, we pull money out and throw it in the general fund, or how does
So
that
it
work?
was very clear on the thing, if it's under budget,
Yeah,
you have this much time, because we don't want anyone in the future boards to manipulate that.
Yeah.
If you have this much time. It wasn't as clear on if it's over budget, that, it just says you have to bring it down in a reasonable amount of time, just to, because we're less worried about flexibility when we have too much
much
than,
money, yeah. I mean, I think if we, I mean, I don't disagree with having an internal service fund policy. I think we would want to have time limits to say, if over the course of 3 years you have it, then this percentage of it goes into the general
Right.
fund.
So,
Yeah.
Because
Farmington,
yeah.
Farmington doing their own health insurance, right?
Did
We
we
did
have,
that,
we
it
had
didn't
it,
work here for.
yeah, we had it for a while, and then
It
we actually
became a
realized
nightmare.
savings.
And you don't know how they did it up front. I mean, the fact that they haven't had increases probably means that they
Have a high,
over budgeted
yeah.
years ago, that,
So Newtown, I
That would be an
believe, did
interesting case study to see what, because at the end of the day, the stuff that we can control, how can we control?
but that's not in control though. See, again, Newtown, when I read their budget, and I could be wrong, I just going through other budgets, Newtown was self-insured, but when you're self-insured, if you have a couple really bad cases, you gotta take that on, that big hit. So Newtown saved all this money, but last year took a hit. They're laying off 26 teachers because of their health insurance increase, because they were self-insured and it was going great for a period of time, and then they had a couple big cases where the numbers got too out of hand, and right now, the last I heard was 25 teachers around the getting laid off because of that they can't afford the health insurance number, because it increased 30% as compared to us going.
Losing 25 teachers.
I don't know, but I'm just saying that so to your thing is, that has been done. More to the policy that Marcia's presenting also plays into Brian's thing is, it would be more transparent on what their budget is. Right, if that number was on their side and we held them to this policy and it came back now, and so there would be a true 5.05%. If we add in like we're talking about, or whatever number blend, they're gonna be a 5.05.
Have you talked to Casey about this concept at all?
we talked to both of them before they put their budget in, that, back in November, we talked about it, and, I believe we talked to their finance committee about it at that same time, but,
All right. I think you've shown as much as I wanted to talk about.
I think, you were asking me to change
Sorry.
some of the numbers.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead, change what you want to change.
I was just thinking if we did, if we put 400, instead of the 650, put 400 into their education budget. And then we'd have to hold, I mean, because we didn't reduce the contingency line yet, right?
No, she did, she took
We should
144 out.
take the
There's a
144 out.
reduction right there, 144,
Oh, yeah.
she did
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I can put that back out.
No,
now.
we should take it
No,
out.
take that out.
Take that out.
Yeah,
Because
Take
we
it out.
added 400.
We added,
So,
So
I mean, we
that.
probably could still take more out of the contingency.
Yeah, I do think so, because contingency is mainly special ed.
but now you're gambling on,
Health insurance, you're
regular.
putting 11% in now, so
If you
you've got
wiggle that up to just under 5%. Oh no, you said 4% is what passes.
Yeah, but the contingency for definitely can go down if we're only looking at,
If we're giving 4, we were initially saying 650.
and they're asking for 620, we're putting 400 there, so 220 of that, and
But we want
I don't know.
contingency for other things too.
so here's your
Yes.
history. So, that input last year, this is my last year's presentation, from 0 to 1%, one time it passed, 1 to 2, 5, 2 to 3, 5 years, 3 to 4, 8 years, 4 to 5, 0, 5 plus was 1 year. It passed. Now, if you
So
look
if
at the
it- if
graph,
it go
the
under
visual, right
yeah.
here, every time the Board of Ed line touches the 4% line, it gets voted down. This was last year's ask, that's not real
Do
data,
you
it
think the
went down.
pendulum will swing because of
But that's real
because of
data
everything that's happening
over,
right now? Or are people
10
getting
years,
scared
that's
because
real
of the
data.
tariffs?
Yeah.
But then again,
Or
the
people
town
scared
does
because
not,
of the
so,
cost of eds. Yeah.
that's, I guess what you're saying is that by us taking the contingency and managing it, the town is not seeing the 4% there, they're not seeing the 5%, they're seeing 3 point. But it is education, it is directly education,
It
right?
is direct education,
Yeah.
not arguing that. It becomes though a control point. Does the town feel more comfortable with us under control with the appropriation process, where it goes from the Board of Ed to the Board of Selectmen, then to the Board of Finance? It's that extra control in place of the money.
But I think we need to find a middle ground. I get their point. I get their point. Like, they're coming into these past few years with big swings. And it does look like they're overspending their budget, even though they're things that we've agreed upon. But I think we need to find a middle ground.
And this is like a good middle ground, where it's more true to what they're seeing, what's in the pipeline. And if they do need to come back, we have the layers of oversight on it.
If we could bring the contingency down to like 2/3 of the amount that it is, I forget what it is right now. What would that number
We took
be?
144 up, but if we took,
Um,
300
Yeah, 300 out,
That's
yeah,
what this exercise is for.
yeah.
I
yeah.
wanted to throw, that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to do, because that gives you a thought process the rest of the week,
yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
builds you to where
So,
you think we
By
need to be.
doing that,
We're still over 4,
That's 4.0 now.
so we really kind of have to take, we kind of have to make them even.
Yeah.
Or if it ends up 409, we go back to them and be like, can you find, get it under 4 somehow? You guys, you
350,
pick.
350, 350?
I think Mary's solution is right. They still gotta come down a little bit more. I do think there's some room to come down a little bit more.
You said that you thought you had areas
I-
where they could?
I think that they can still look at busing as well. I think that maybe even if they don't change the Healthy Starts, I've listened and looked at people, and there's ways to
I
to
read your
get it down,
presentation
and
today,
that
this
there's
morning.
ways to do this, I think.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
like the healthy start times.
Yeah, but I do agree
mean,
with Glenn that there is,
I think
maybe there's
room.
something that we can, yeah, we have to bring the number down. So
I
how do we
think
do it is the question. I think it's about,
I mean, I think the busing issue is more that we ended, I don't, because it used to be that the elementary school bus drivers then drove like the high school or whatever, and now you have, because you have all the kids going, you have 2 bus runs that are essentially happening at the same time. And I think that's the problem.
Other towns are figuring it out.
I mean, if they staggered although the parents are gonna complain that their elementary school kids are,
I think
They're
if
all
we
driving their
try-
kids to school
I think if we
anyway.
just go back to them and say, we need to
Nathan is-
find another 1%, can you help us find another 1%? Or half a
1%'s
percent?
too high.
Half a percent,
Half a percent's more in
percent.
line.
yeah, half a
1%'s too high.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree.
Half a
Yeah, so if we
percent.
fund more of this on the front end, you guys have to find a little savings to
Yeah,
get it
can you
back
find
under
us
4.
half a percent of
That's
savings
where my
somewhere?
head is at
And
right
they'll
now.
they'll figure, they've done,
That's my head is at.
Because
totally.
they're probably
But-
expecting us to
the things that they
pass something like that.
froze this year are still in the budget for this coming year, right? That was, they didn't cut them, I mean, they didn't double up on anything, it was
I
just
think they have to
postponing.
have some room, right? We all know, right? There are things that happen that are unexpected, unseen.
Agreed.
We gotta have some room to maneuver, right? And then when the time comes to maneuver, we find that and we.
I just feel like we've tightened their budgets a lot.
Listen,
So how much
that's what I'm
that-
It's
saying.
been tight
Yeah,
for so many years in a row.
Yeah.
yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That
those
they have
first
to have
couple
some
of years,
room
it was easy to
maneuver.
find savings, but we're not there. I haven't looked at capital, I don't even know what capital looks like.
Capital's low. Don't even stress on that. You might want to add to that before you take away from that.
I have to just disclose Brad's now in the Parks and Rec Commission, so.
Steve's back in our
I got him
meeting.
into civil engagement. Yay.
We're stressing on the numbers.
Yeah.
No, there's no stress here.
We're
Money
having a,
doesn't grow on trees.
Seems like I sold it for you guys.
Can we get solar panels? Would that help with the electric bill?
If we did what?
Everything.
Solar panels? Yeah,
Yes,
well, Titan
yes.
is looking at our buildings, and I think that would help. Um,
If
Our
there are new and
our
improved
solar
rooms that
bill
can
would-
handle the
A
load.
solar bill would
Let-
be.
They're gonna come back
we
to
gotta
us.
cut this meeting. Marcia's gotta get
Oh,
home.
no, I'm.
So they're gonna come back to us. The 3 best places are the schools, roofs. CLES, no brainer. All set to go. Roof can take
That
it.
was expected to get solar or something.
We even have the chases to go down to bring them from the roof.
Awesome.
The high school and Wisconsin, parts of the roof have been completed. The parts that have been completed have a lot of equipment and stuff, so it's not really good for solar. So I've asked Jules to go back to Titan and say, and Titan first said, well, those aren't good buildings. I said, well, do. I want you to give us, you said you would do this, give us a full proposal for all our buildings, and even if we have to do it phased, give us a plan for the high school, right? Because we are doing 2 sections of the roof this year. They just want the quick CLES, and I'm saying, no, we want the full plan. Even if we can't do it this year, we do it next year, we do it in phases, right?
See, I do agree along with the lines of what you're saying, even Wendy said. Even if it's an investment to get a savings, we gotta make those investments.
Yes.
But we gotta have a plan, and there
Yes.
wasn't a
Yep.
plan. And that's what I keep
Yeah.
saying is, we talk status quo. Status quo doesn't have that initiative plan built into it. And that's where I get stressed too, is, you know, if it costs us an extra
I do think they had a
100,000.
few ideas today, and I think maybe we could just continue the conversation on the special ed side of how can we, you know, the $165,000 in professional fees.
It sounds
they
like
had
that
last year.
transition program is a big cost, which I didn't realize.
It is.
And I mean, that seems like the type of thing that a bunch of towns could get together and create a program.
Yeah.
Because
Alright.
that's a more similar set of needs, I think, than.
Unless the
Yeah.
18 to 22s.
We're,
They were already
you know,
doing it.
this is almost a perfect storm. We have the electric rates increase,
Health
we have
insurance.
special ed doubling, right?
Insurance.
Insurance going through the roof.
Yeah, yeah.
We're real, and motor vehicles, all at the same
Agreed.
time.
That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about. It's a perfect
And
storm.
the teacher overages too, I think that, I noted down, I was like, maybe we should, and I don't know if they can get creative, but we're not saving as we were before, right?
No, we're not.
And that's the thing that maybe, I don't know.
But I think they had a big bolus of retirements too, didn't they? I mean, did they
Not
have
the year I
another
did the study. There was a year they did.
How,
They had
how
big-
do you
there was
attract
a year they
talent,
did.
and how do we get
They
the
did.
talent at a level, that's the, it's a hard question, but it's a question, right?
It is a question, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
This was so fun. Tomorrow night.
We should.
Bye,
Bye.
Brianna,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye,
I thought you were home, sorry.
Feel
I didn't wanna
better.
bother you, you were ill.
Bye.